All right, everybody. Hey, hey, hey. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be. Glad to have you here with us and looking forward to a fun and awesome session today. Really diving into some good stuff around talent acquisition research, what we're seeing for the coming year, what we expect to be ahead. It's going to be a blast. I can't wait to share with you. And when I get the thumbs up from my colleague George Rogers to bring him on, I'll do that. All right, I got the not just a thumbs up, but like the gnarly, cool, whatever that thing
I
is.
give you two of them. I don't know what that is. Those
There are
it's not
pinkies involved as
characters.
well.
Got to have the pinky in there. Rock and roll, ready to rock and roll. How you know, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. Glad to be here and looking forward to sharing some insights, sharing some research. Like I said, it's going to be a blast. Got a lot of good stuff to pack into the next hour and 59 minutes or so. So I can't wait to get started here. So go ahead and bring up a couple of our quick housekeeping things. Just if you've been on a live stream with us before, you know what to expect. If you have not, this is new for you. So we'll give you some insight here. So really quickly, a quick shout out. Thank you to the sponsors and supporters of the event. We appreciate them for making this possible and really bringing this to all of us. Couple things. Giving stuff away. We always give stuff away here at the events. It's one of the things we love to do, just to give back to the community, to maybe to bribe you a little bit, to be engaged and connected with us. So stacks of books hanging out. I've got this awesome Ember mug we're actually doing this time. I don't think I even told you, George. So no, you can't win it. So chime in, be engaged, ask questions, interact with the speakers when they're there in the chat. Like several of our speakers will be here today with us. Just have some fun with this, build the community. It's a good place to be. We'll share out the credits after the event. So I always get that question. I'm probably going to get that email in right in the next few minutes. So I'm like, oh, I couldn't make it. Where's the credits? After the event, we always send those details out. And then if you have trouble with LinkedIn, occasionally it hangs up, it freezes, refresh it. If it still is giving you trouble, there are links to the YouTube or the Facebook stream. We'll post those into the chat here as well, here on LinkedIn, so you can find those. You can jump over to the other streams. You'll hear the same thing, same time. You won't miss anything or have a lag either. So really quickly on the agenda, opening announcements here. We're going to have a keynote panel in just a moment with a couple of amazing leaders. You'll hear all about them in that session. It's going to be great. We have a couple of other sessions following that. Talru, Bright Hire Brazen all came together, brought us amazing speakers. We'll be sharing some different insights across how to connect intentionally and get a high quality connection with candidates, using interview training and developing our leaders to be better interviewers. We're going to talk about how to connect out there using your EVP and how to stand out from the crowd. Angela from Centara Health has got some good stuff there. So great sessions. And last but not least, William Tincup actually joined me. We're going to do a little bit of a preview on some of the research we have out there that shares what to expect is coming next. And so before we actually get started, I know that sometimes you join an event, they're like, hey, we're going to hold the good stuff till the very end. And I'm not going to do that to you. So I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes sharing a couple of quick tidbits, just snippets from the research, things that I think you need to know, and that will be good practical takeaways just to start off the bat, just to show you what kind of good stuff to expect from the conversation today. So really quickly, a couple things from the data. So in our research, we actually break out teams, TA teams that are high performing, that are proactive, that are leaning in, looking for ways to partner, from those that are a little more reactive. Like I'll take the requisition, but I don't really look for ways to partner. There's a divide there, and we all know that. What we find are those companies that are more proactive, more high performing. Those TA teams do things differently. They see the world differently. They experience work differently. And I won't go into all of these things here. Actually, we'll touch on some of these in the sessions today with some of our speakers. But they're much more likely to say that hiring, even when things are kind of shaky, even things are kind of strange economically, hiring is a competitive advantage. They're much more likely to lean in on that one. The other one I want to talk about is actually here on the bottom. They're much more likely to be using any AI tools, automation, things like that. And they're using it not just to keep people at arm's length, but to actually use it to give them time for other things that matter, like building relationships with their hiring managers, with their candidates, with their leadership team internally, all of that. And the number one way that we're seeing talent teams right now using some of those tools is through things like ChatGPT. They have it embedded in some talent technologies, but a lot of them are just going out and testing it themselves. And if you have not done this, there's some fun things that you can do with it. For example, I need to generate a new job ad or a job description. Maybe I need to write some emails to candidates. I want it to tailor those for me or help me so I'm not starting from a blank page. Or I've got an interview for something brand new I've never hired for. I need an interview question bank. Give me some questions I can ask to develop or understand the competency of people in this interview slate. So you can use it for lots of things like that. You can also use the plugins for things like sourcing. So I'll show you a quick example of that because we actually did the test with this recently, where you use this, you go to ChatGPT, you use this link reader plugin, and I had found a database online of all these different doctors. Well, if I'm recruiting doctors, I go and plug that link in and say, download this. I want to be able to email all these people. And it generates this list for me. You see here, this is the list it created for me right there in the moment in just a few minutes, instead of me having to manually go through and pull all those in. So I wanted to share that little bit of nerdy stuff. And again, George, I probably like surprised you with that because you weren't expecting it, but just to give you some ideas of like, there's so many possibilities. There's a lot of stuff coming, but the TA teams I'm talking to that are really doing impressive things, they're having a high impact right now, are using things like this to be able to scale their impact and scale what they can do and who they can support at the end of the day. Any comments on that, George? Like you blown away, like sitting back in your chair blown away a little bit? What's the thought?
You know, by the way, nothing really, I won't say nothing really surprises me, but I feel like every once in a while, Ben has to do something a little bit different. As you're bringing me on this journey of our team here in Lighthouse Research Advisory, the data stuff, like nothing's going to surprise me much. But then you go an extra level and you get into this AI, and I'm learning this AI thing. I'm really intrigued by it. I'm using it. I shared some stuff with yesterday. As I'm excited. But I always think, and I just had this conversation with somebody here in the office today that that's kind of worried about the whole AI replacing people. And at the end of the day, I'm like, AI is your friend. AI still needs you as much as you need it. And so what I believe is going to take place in the next few years as we grow into this phase, especially with ChatGPT and the impact that can help organizations and our HR leaders out there that will, that are grasping this and using. I think the impact is going to be beautiful. And I'm excited about some of the trends that comes with it as well when it comes to some of those real life scenarios and quick responses that you'll be able to have to be able to operate better and efficiently. There's so much that is to be done with it that I think is going to be good for a lot of people if you embrace it. It's all about embracing. Change is difficult, but change is easy as well. Change is what you make it is what I realize.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, George, for the comments there, for the insight and the input. You're my expert on human work and really connecting with people, and you do that better than I do, like naturally or through practice. You do that better than I do. So I appreciate that perspective from you on that. All right, everybody. Well, we're going to go ahead and dive into our first session here. We're going to hear from some amazing leaders from Coca-Cola, RBC, from Strava, how they're thinking about the coming year, what their priorities are, what's really right there in their windshield, and how they're prioritizing those kind of things. So let's get out of the way and dive in.
Welcome to our opening session here at the event. I'm so glad you're here with us and looking forward to learning from these amazing speakers, sharing some good ideas, all that kind of good stuff. We're got some energy going here. So I've got this amazing panel along with me. I have Lisa Brignall from Coca-Cola Europe Pacific. I have Camille Tate from Strava. I need to get one of those awesome neon looking backgrounds. Camille, love that. And then Travis Windling, he is at RBC, and we're going to be talking about some of the big picture things that they and their teams are focusing on for the coming year, some of the things they're excited about, some things that they've accomplished. Or I'm hoping this is going to give you some ideas, really set the stage for the rest of this event so you can have some big things kind of percolating in the back of your mind, some big ideas, and to hear from some other leaders just like you who are in the trenches, who are trying to solve these big problems that we're all facing right now when it comes to hiring and bringing on the very best talent. So with that kind of groundwork set, I'm going to go ahead and let everybody do a quick intro for each other, do a quick intro for yourself before we dive into some of the conversation and the questions for the day. So Camille, would you be willing to go first? A quick intro for yourself, and we'll pass that ball over to Lisa.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Ben, amongst some great some great people. I'm excited to be here. My name is Camille Tate. My pronouns are she, her. I work for Strava, if you can't tell. I've been with Strava for almost 3 years. I'm the head of talent there. I've been in TA for about 18 years, mostly in tech, and excited to talk about 2024 trends and kind of what we're excited about. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Lisa, how about you?
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Ben, for inviting me. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm actually based in GB. So I head up the talent acquisition function for Coca-Cola Europe Pacific Partners, a leading FMCG organization, and I head that up for GB. So really excited to be here to talk about some of the trends and some of the things we're excited about going forward.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Travis, you, my friend.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Travis Willing. I'm currently at RBC as the global head of TA strategy, analytics, and a bunch of other things as well. Basically, anything that's not TA delivery is kind of my wheelhouse. Spent my career in kind of financial services and tech and manufacturing across the board. Started on kind of the TA operational side, leading sourcing, and then moved into people analytics for about eight or 9 years. And then I'm back in TA again. So looking forward to kind of bringing the data function front and center, because TA is probably the easiest place to do that.
All right. Awesome. I'm excited. You know me, I'm a sucker for some good data. So any chance I have to get to tap into that kind of thing, I always appreciate that chance. And that may or may not be the only reason I ask you here, Travis. I won't tell you for sure. So, all right. So let's, just to get this ball rolling and get things running through here, let's start kind of casting a big vision for the audience here, what we're thinking about. So I'd love, Travis, I'd let you start with this if you don't mind. But things that you're looking forward to in 2024 from a TA perspective specifically, what sort of things are top of mind, things that you're excited about, anything that's in your windshield that you're looking forward to?
Sure. So for us, it's really been interesting. So RBC started our journey with Workday about 18 months ago. We did the HCM system as well as the TA module at the same time. Wouldn't recommend. Probably parse those out in the future. But in terms of what that looks like, one of the things that I think I'm really looking forward to is looking at the TA process kind of in a bit of a two-factor layer. So looking at system of experience versus system of record. So Workday is a great system of record, transactional system in terms of what it does, but it's lacking a little bit in some of those system of experience pieces. So that's where we're looking to look at our tech stack and kind of put that system of experience, both from a hiring manager, candidate, recruiter experience, all kind of on top of that in terms of building that really contemporary TA tech stack. So that's a big piece of work that we're looking at in 2023, 2024. And then the other piece is really from an external markets perspective, getting us back to how do we look at our internal workforce and start to do some more of that workforce planning, internal talent mobility, really understand kind of how skills play into this and how we can start to look at kind of that external data to inform what we can do with our internal data. As we all know, kind of those black swan events are hitting us fast and furious these days. So really looking to take a step back and understand kind of our internal talent and how kind of skills can ladder up into work and where we can go from there.
Right. Excellent. Awesome. Wonderful. And nobody, I think, was surprised to hear you say data like 7 times in that little bit of a little segment there. But I think that's important for us. And TA has so much data often on hand, but we're not always sure how to use it, how to make sense of it, how to parse that out into something that actually is usable and actionable from a daily perspective. And so I get excited about that piece of it. Okay, awesome. Lisa, how about you? What are you and your team looking forward to in the coming year, things that you're excited about and planning for?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And listening to Travis, not too dissimilar from what you're thinking about, Travis. So I'm a big advocate here of diverse hiring. So I'm putting that out there because I'll probably cover that off quite a bit. So I think some of the things that equally have been proud of and things that we'll do in the future in 2024 is continue to look for ways in which we can engage with people who perhaps wouldn't ordinarily think about working for us through diverse and inclusive hiring and through how we market ourselves and brand ourselves. It's important for us for obvious reasons of it being the right thing to do, but also from a business perspective as well. And actually, over the last couple of years, with the markets being as it has been, it really has given us an advantage to support our talent pipeline and to obviously accelerate what, the talent that we have in the future that can really help us perform as a business as well. So that's a biggie for me, and that covers everything. So at the moment, big factors for us are, how do we get more women in manufacturing in the organization? Because it's not just a Coca-Cola or Pacific Partners issue, it's an industry issue. How do we partner across the industry to actually really support, promote careers in manufacturing? So that's a biggie for me at the moment. Other for me is making those data-led decisions, because I think for me and my team, we've really been looking at how we can create certainty wherever possible out of a very uncertain market. And a lot of the ways that we do that is being far more data-led and insights-led and driven. And also by controlling the narrative of the story of TA with our leaders. So actually not assuming that people understand what the talent acquisition and labour marketplace is like, but actually creating that understanding by storytelling around it and making it everybody's business.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. I like that a lot. Wonderful. I'll have to come back to you on the women in manufacturing piece in a minute, because I know that y'all are doing some creative things you and I have talked about in the past in the hiring side that's most companies probably never thought of. And I think I would imagine that probably helps there, but I'd love to get your take on that. So in just a bit.
Definitely.
All right. So Camille, how about you? Things that you're looking forward to, things that you're excited about in the coming year. What's on your radar from a TA perspective?
So many things. I'm excited about 2024. Every year, I'm always thinking about how we go back to the basics, though, of recruiting, because recruiting is a relationship business. It's not about cherry picking different people from different companies or different communities. It's about building relationships, and kind of what we try to do on our app, Strava. We're trying to be the center of connected fitness. We have over 100 million athletes on the app. And so the same that we're trying to build community in terms of our app is the same thing that we try to do internally, and how that translates. So tapping into how can we partner with organizations? How can we invest in organizations and partnerships for underrepresented groups? I think it's important that organizations, put your money in your handshake where your mouth is, making sure that you're tapping into those relationships and having events. I love having events from a recruitment standpoint. I'm glad the Earth is continuing to open up somewhat and we're able to be in person. We had an event this year with Latinas in Tech, hopefully to do more things like that in our office and beyond. So that's one thing. Also, just making sure that we build training and avenues for our teams and our hiring managers to know that recruiting is preparation for retention. I think that's super important. I think it's really top of mind that we should focus on that, because a lot of people think that, recruiting is just like the top of funnel. It's just getting people in the door. But the experience that people have during the recruitment process, it definitely data has supported that it flows into the retention of that individual throughout their life cycle. So definitely focusing on making sure that we're on the same page with hiring managers and making sure that we're prepared from a talent management standpoint. We know what we're hiring for. We know what the business objectives are. We're correlating that with competencies and making sure also candidate experience is always going to be top of mind for me every year, making sure that people have a good experience with Strava, whether or not they get a job with us, they still think about Strava and how we made them feel.
Goodness, that goes back to that community piece you mentioned, right? Making them feel like they're part of a community, not just part of this transactional sort of assembly line. We're pushing them down. Wonderful. Excellent. When you said that a minute ago, Travis was like doing the head bob, like, oh yeah. Travis, there's something that came to mind for you when she talked about that? Because I know you mentioned internal hiring, some other things there. I know that ties in really well with retention as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, retention is the easiest quality of hire metric out there. In terms of really measuring your impact from a recruitment perspective, that's bar none the easiest one to kind of get your hands on. And I think that's where everybody needs to start. There's some really cool stuff that you can do around O&A and things like that for, timed integration and all those other things. But if you want to start simple, it all goes back to that retention piece, as Camille was saying, which is absolutely huge.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned, Travis, a minute ago that you were looking at things like internal hiring. And one of the things that we see in our data is that when someone says, hey, so let me back up for a second. 2 out of 3 workers have told us that they've quit a job at some point because they didn't have a like a step in front of them. They didn't feel like there was anything to advance. But 9 out of 10 of those people said, I would have taken that step if I could have just seen it, essentially. And so would you talk for a second about the internal hiring piece, whether it's how you're thinking about that now, or maybe gaps you've seen at other companies in the past, anything that might be helpful or practical to people listening in?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, for me, the internal mobility piece actually starts with external market data. So it's being able to correlate kind of your internal job catalog to the external market in terms of this person goes into these jobs next. These are the skills that you need to do those jobs. And then just kind of democratizing that data to employees to say, you know, your engineer 1 goes to an engineer 2. These are the skills that are different. This is how long it takes to get them. This is how much it costs. And you can really, there's a lot of technologies out there that will actually help you map that now to say, this is exactly what that kind of career path looks like. You know, you see some vendors in the market space that have kind of made that their thing. But even from an AP perspective, there's a lot that you can do yourself just with that kind of skill adjacency type approach in the market.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for touching on that for a second, because that's something I always get a little bit or a lot excited about. And I think that's important for people to hear here, because it ties with some of the other things like Lisa even commented on a minute ago. Lisa, you talked about, we've got to help our leaders really understand what's happening outside the business, not just seeing, are we filling these jobs, yes or no, but listen, the world out there is different. And maybe the talent is more scarce than it was before, or maybe we're trying to solve this problem of getting more women in manufacturing, but guess what? There just aren't that many to go around. So we're all stealing from each other. How do we develop a new class or a new crop of those individuals to be developed and ready to take those sorts of roles? One of the things that you talked about, Lisa, that you and I have had this conversation before about some of the things that y'all do in the hiring process to really help candidates ask questions and experience what it's like to work there by talking to some of the employees. Would you talk about that piece just a little bit here? Because I would imagine most of the audience has not heard our interview on that in the past. I'd love for you to just touch on that a little bit, because I think it really helps to tie some of these other things together that we're talking about so far.
Yeah, and I probably didn't touch upon it in terms of always looking forward. We're looking at how we brand ourselves and be very authentic about that branding, because if, you know, let's face it, we're not after every single candidate applying for us. We're after the candidates that will thrive with the organization and can match their values and skills to our organization. So one of the things that we do really well, I think, is tell very authentic stories via our employees for our branding. So I think that's very much emotionally connecting with the audience. But also we do have an option for any candidate to speak to one of our employees at any time, usually through chat, ask any questions they like. It could be questions, for example, about, you know, how many calls they might do in a field sales call. And it could be questions around the values of the organization, you know, the policies on well-being, on all of the things that matter to different candidates and are very, very important for them to know when they're going to a new employer. And we call that our Insiders program. And we've got 20 really passionate advocates of our brand who work with us on that as employees across all different functions. So, you know, we do represent every single part of our organization and provide just some very authentic, personalized storytelling about what it feels like to work for the organization. And we like them to be very honest about that as well, because we know we're not perfect all of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What I love about that is you're not just saying we hold all the keys, all the power, all the content, but we trust our people, right? They're going to tell the truth. They'll say, hey, some days are hard, but here's the long-term, like I've worked here for this period of time because of this. Here's how it makes me feel. And right, Camille, that types in that community piece you were talking about a minute ago so well, because it creates this community where people are not afraid to share. The company's not afraid to give them a little bit of direction and then let them run with that. So there's some really good things in there that bring that all together and help us to tell our stories, to appeal to the candidates out there. And I think it helps overall. Camille, I'd love to get your take on this, because you talked about like Latinas in tech and things like that. But to have someone that looks like me, sounds like me, that's already working there or who's had experience with the company, that seems like it would be more comforting or encouraging to them to say there's less risk for me to be the standout person here, and more likely to feel like there's a real community around me. Camille, what's your take on that? You think that's fair, true?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get comments all the time and my team does as well. And even some of my peers and colleagues, we get messages all the time like, oh, I saw my panel for my interview today. It brings a sense of comfort, right? Because let's be honest, and there are a lot of companies, organizations that are not particularly safe spaces for people from underrepresented groups. And me having that experience in my previous work history, I understand that, right? And people are already, and this is what I tell hiring managers all the time, people are already so nervous in interviews. Like it's really like feeling like someone has your future, in their hands,
Yes.
right? And so they're already so nervous. How cool would it be, or how comforting would it be to already kind of break down those barriers ahead of time? And to be honest, curious as to why I don't see more diverse talent teams, because if companies are saying, hey, our top of mind is DEI and this and that, but their whole team looks the same, it's kind of like, are you really? And so that's really important to me when I came into Strava. And I think it's also important when you're trying to recruit and you're saying that you have a focus on, any aspect of diversity, equity, inclusion, to ensure that you're creating the foundation and the groundwork for people to come into your organization. And maybe they don't get hired, but they felt like they had a good experience through the interview process because they were able to speak to people that could relate to them, right? And so I think it's really important that we, focus on that, because it transcends so many different avenues and pathways in TA and our connection with community and candidates.
Excellent. All right. You've talked a couple of times about the empowering the hiring managers piece, and I want you to think on that a little bit, because I'm going to come back to you in a second for our like practical takeaways and stuff. And if there's anything there you want to share or something else, I would love for you to bring that. But I think that's one of the things I hear consistently when I'm talking to TA leaders is like, we can have well-developed TA teams, we can hire the best people for our right, but we're also dependent on our partners across the aisle who are making these hiring decisions. So I'll come back to you in a second on that one. All right. So our time is going so fast. I had planned to ask several more questions, and we're going to be like glued on that. So Travis, I want to come back to you. People listening in right now, you talked about data and some other things so far. I'd love for you to share any practical advice, any practical tips, suggestions for people listening in. Maybe someone already has that bent like you and I do towards the data. They think, how can I use this to serve the organization better, to serve our candidates better, right, serve our recruiting teams better? So they may already lean in that way, but anything else you'd like to share on the data side or something else that might be practical?
Yeah, so a couple of things. And I think Camille hit the nail on the head in terms of that community piece and people like me. So that's actually one of the things, that's where your kind of strategic lead kind of needs to come from. It has to be people like them. So that's super important to us kind of going forward. From a data perspective, I think I'll offer two pieces of advice, one from a more of a futurist perspective, and then one from a really kind of get your hands dirty. So the get your hands dirty is really look at your cycle times, and don't look at just time to fill, but look at, time to find, time to attract, time to source, break it down across your entire value chain, because that's what's really going to get you started in terms of where you have a problem. So really understanding kind of the nuances between your different steps in your recruitment and build reporting around exactly what that looks like, because that's how your leaders are going to be able to coach, and your team is going to get stronger because of that. So that would be your get your hands dirty kind of piece. The other piece from more of a futurist perspective is look at science, like behavioral sciences, IO psychology. We have years of experience with how human behavior actually works that corporations do not use. And I think one of the things that I would say is it's going to get even more important as we go more down that hard skills side of things, because you look at kind of skill coverage and things like that, you're going to keep hiring the same people because those people have had the same experiences and the same opportunities across their lifespan. But if you start to take a step back and you look at, from a job analysis perspective, what's important to my job in terms of what behaviors, like you look at contact center, it's really that empathy place, especially in claims and things like that. You can train on all the systems, you can train on all the techniques, you can train on all of those things. But even to Lisa's point around kind of women in manufacturing, figure out what is important to those manufacturing jobs from a behavioral perspective and hire people that are predisposed to have those types of behaviors and train on the rest. So I think that from a futurist perspective is going to be the absolute most important, because as you look at generative AI and the impact of Chat GPT and things like that, candidates are going to get to the point where it's like, here's my resume. Here's the job description. Write me an application. Oh, look, it's 100% keyword match. Sorry about your luck, recruiter. You now have to go through everything. So get ahead of that trend.
I saw some data recently that says 70% of college graduates are using ChatGPT for that exact purpose, Travis. So it's getting harder for recruiters, not easier, especially at that's entry-level stage or that recent grad stage, to separate out the candidates because they're all starting to look the same because they're using those tools to try to match up there. All right, Lisa, I'm going to come to you next. Practical ideas, strategies, solutions, encouragements for the people listening in here, things that they can be thinking about to level up their TA function in the coming year.
Yeah, I'm just actually going to build on Travis's last comments around skills-based assessments, because I think that's probably something that is very much talked about in TA communities and wider as well. So exactly to your point, Travis, on the women in manufacturing problem that I mentioned earlier, or not problem, actually.
Opportunity. Yes.
Opportunity. We've done exactly that. So we've used data to very much make sure that people are aware that talent that we're trying to attract just isn't out there. And actually, if we want to attract that type of talent, we do need to look at problems slightly differently, differences in mindset, differences in our expectations of skills, what's trainable. So one really practical example that we're doing, certainly at CCEP, is looking at hiring for potential across those roles that we can. So traditional qualifications or traditional experience that you would have required, we're kind of throwing the rule book out on that and saying, well, actually, what is it that we require from people and what can we train in? And we're in the very lucky position of having some great learning development functionality and resources to do that. So we've been doing that across our sales teams for the last few years. And what that means is we don't ask for qualifications. We're not interested in people having done a sales job before. What we're interested in is the real soft skills that would mean that they could really thrive in that job. And they would enjoy that job, quite frankly, as well. Because it's not everybody's cup of tea, that job. And also we're doing the same thing across our manufacturing sites as well. So actually saying, well, do we actually need people who've got this technical skill set, or can we actually train that in? And actually, are we looking for people with teamwork skills who are able to multitask, who like to learn, who are curious, all of those things that we need in that job for people to thrive. So again, just putting some of what Travis is saying into some of the practice, it is working. We are diversifying our workforce. We've got some brilliant talent in through those methods. We've got high performing talent. We've got different skill sets and mindsets and experience and diversity of thought. And that's our future talent. So that's a really good entryway into that future talent that we need.
It would probably encourage you to hear that when we did our survey on candidates this year, global candidate data sets, over 1,000 people, we said, what is the number one way that an employer can show respect for you during the hiring process? And the number one way was they have to see me for my potential, not just for this bundle of skills that I have right now. Because so many of them are boiled down to either yes or no, you're above the bar, below the bar, just based on that skill set. And a lot of companies don't take the time, don't put the effort in, because it is difficult to do. Don't put the effort in to figure out what that potential is, because once you do that, you see the candidate in an entirely different light, typically.
You do. You're not looking at job titles. You're looking at those very specific skill sets that might indicate success in the future, and making sure that all of your assessment processes, that whole candidate experience is geared towards that. So using strengths-based interview questions, identifying trainability, as opposed to someone being able to actually execute a task right there and then, all made harder. But I certainly would encourage people to start thinking outside the box on that if they're not already, because it does widen your net and it really supports that diverse hiring as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. All right, Camille. Big, any ideas, any practical strategies, solutions? Like you're like high-fiving. I can see when Travis and start sharing. So you're like, yes, but what do you have?
I'm also taking notes.
Me too, my friend.
Right. I think it's kind of speaking to, I mean, it's using data to drive decisions or make decisions. Also, really that partnership. I think that will be a big focus for us. We were able, since we kind of slowed down hiring, we were able to do some trainings, some bias in the interview process training, some hiring manager experience to get people set up for success. I think, you know, the past couple of years we hired so much, and when you hire a lot of folks into an organization and double the size of the organization, you have people interviewing from their frame of reference, you know, and yeah, I used to do it over here at this company. I used to do this. No, we're at Strava now. We have a baseline of how we want to interview our candidates. No, you know, hey, candidate, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You know, no low hanging fruit like that as far as those type of interview questions, really quality interview questions based on competency and what's relevant to the job. And then how do you write feedback, right? How do you write, you know, objective, clear feedback, not on questions you thought about asking the candidate, but questions you actually did ask the candidate. So a lot of things that, you know, we want to work on, they may sound basic, but they contribute greatly to the process for a candidate and also for the internal hiring teams that's trying to make a decision, right? Do you have the right information? Did you prepare your questions ahead of time? Did you have a prep session with all of your interview panel to discuss what are the outcomes that we all agree that, you know, what we're looking for this role and how they're going to interact with cross-functional teams. So all of those things are really important. I think sometimes if you get busy with other things, you kind of take your eyes off the prize in terms of consistency. And things like this. So I think practicing consistency is something to really be focused on in terms of having a smooth engine running for a TA in 2024. Because, you know, TA, we work with audibles, right? Things are going to change next year. We have our sights set on all these things for 2024. We have no idea what it's going to bring. So just the allowing yourself to be flexible, that's something to have on your top priority for 2024 is to be flexible and open to what the year is going to bring and also be able to prepare your team to have the agility to adjust.
Oh, wonderful. I love this range of things. I wish we could do this for another hour because I've got, again, taking notes over here, some great takeaways, everything else. But I realize that all of us have real work to do today, probably as well, in addition to this. So thank you to Travis, to Lisa, to Camille for your ideas, your suggestions, your encouragement to the people listening in here. To all of you out there listening right now, I'm going to make sure and tag all three of them right now in the comments on LinkedIn. So you can click right over. Please don't do that like one click and just blindly ping them. Say, hey, I heard you on the live stream. I really enjoyed your thoughts. Here's the thing, the takeaway I got from you even. They'd appreciate that. They love knowing what landed, what didn't. So ping them, reach right over here for LinkedIn, do the chat here, and you can connect right with them. I know they'll appreciate that. And thank you to all of you for hanging out with us, getting the session started here for the live stream today. We're going to have some great content coming ahead. Stay tuned for more.
All right, goodness. I had such a great time hearing from each one of those amazing speakers. And I told all of them after we were done, like I could have taken any one of them for a full half hour alone and just had a great deep dive into the things they care about. So we got a good kind of spectrum there. George, I'd love to hear from you. What was your big takeaway or takeaways? What stood out to you in that conversation?
Yeah, I think something that really sticks out to me, Ben, and it's just been something I've been so passionate about very recently and even more so. The piece about the storytelling, the importance of that storytelling and sharing the experience versus hoping that it becomes catchable. I think a lot of organizations miss out on that opportunity. That the best marketing when it comes to recruitment is really internal. Like if your employees are happy about where they are and who they are working with, that kind of spreads the message, and being able to share that message with other people, sharing those testimonials while Ben is happy. Why is Allison happy? Like what makes Allison want to work for the company or Amy want to work for the company that she's working with, right? Tell her that story. That's a part of that recruitment, and that recruitment is important. I think, the preparation for recruitment is in that retention piece as well. And of course, the word that sticks out to me a lot as well, we talk about community within our, service school, our network here. with a lot of our alumni is community is so important as well, and what that really breeds, and having that preparation. I think ultimately, Ben, and I'll wrap it up with this, those are the two things that really kind of stuck up to me. And I think the other thing is when you're recruiting and you're in that hiring phase, the importance of understanding not necessarily what you see in that person, because that's important as well, but having that potential new hire telling you what's important to them, the potential that they have, what are their gifts, what are their strengths, what are their talents, because it may not be necessarily for the position that you're hiring for. It may be something for a position in the future, or maybe there's another thing that may fit them as well. So understanding their full potential and strengths that they have as an individual and what that means for the organization, one, to tie it in so they feel like they're connected and involved, using their strengths and their potential. And then number two, I think it's important for organizations. I am always excited about potential because I am passionate about leadership development. And so for organizations that have leadership development included in that, you see that potential, it's our responsibility to say, I'm gonna bring that potential out of you. Otherwise, I always say potential is like a Christmas tree gift. You know what it is. It's that guitar that you've been waiting for. You can see it. You can't really disguise it. But a gift unwrapped and used is just a gift underneath the tree. I want to be able to use that potential, and it's part of the organization's responsibility to say, all right, we see that potential that you have, we can develop that, and that brings, when you talk about retention, when you're able to develop people into the role and into the position that you have for them, it's so impactful, and people want to be there. And again, that just starts the cycle all over again of recruitment. I was here, I was there. I'll tell that story for you. That'd be part of the storytelling as well, Ben.
I love that. I like the Christmas tree metaphor too. Like seeing the potential
Potential
being
just
that present under the tree. You know what it is. I can see it in there. Like I got to help, but I've got to at some point take it out and actually make use of it in order for it to have its full value and worth. I like that. I may have to steal that one. Okay, wonderful, awesome, goodness. All right, so everybody, we've had some good conversation already. Thank you again, Camille, Lisa, Travis, each of you, incredible leaders in your own right, and together that was almost too much awesome to bear. We're going to dive into our next conversation, talking with Thad Price from Talroo. We're going to talk about creating a deeper connection with candidates, which is fun because these conversations are completely separate. They have no idea what the other leaders and panelists are talking about. So you'll start to see some themes weaving through this. And this is one thing that I know you love doing, George, is looking for those little pieces that connect across these conversations. And I think in spite of me starting out with like, hey, there's some cool stuff with automation, AI, everything else, we're going to see this coming back to the human connection as a key part of what really matters in the coming year, especially for recruiting and doing that well. So without any further ado, let's dive into the conversation with Thad Price.
I am so excited to be here with you.
This
I have
an
amazing,
idea, I think, is
longtime
really
friend of mine, Thad Price. Probably heard that for the very first time here.
Some of the things
how do you
that
practically
Talroo
use
and
that
the
as
team
a
there are
TA
seeing.
leader.
All right, I have some AV issues here on my end. I'm going to fix that one, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. I'm going to get our second speaker in session up instead. Apologies there. Oh goodness, gotta love the live stream audibles. I think Camille just said we have audibles in TA, and live streaming is a good prep for that. So I'm going to go ahead and play our conversation with Nicole Hirsch from Lattice. She's going to talk about, again, some themes we heard in that first conversation, developing our hiring managers, developing those relationships with them, making sure they are effective and as capable as they can be, because when they're doing great work, it makes our jobs easier. And it helps them to have better outcomes, create better relationships with candidates as well. So you'll hear some great stuff from Nicole here. I enjoyed the conversation so much. I ended up actually running over a little bit, had to trim it back down just because there was so much good stuff. We'll be actually replaying a podcast at some point on the We're Only Human feed with the full interview because we had to trim it down. So much to capture there. So here's Nicole Hirsch from Lattice. We'll let her dive in here and talk about developing our hiring managers and interview training, all that good stuff. Here we go. And I know you've gotten some good notes, some good ideas, strategies already for today's conversations, and we're about to give you some more. We're going to really talk about how to enable partnerships with our hiring leaders, how to make sure that we're developing them so they're able to really have good conversations during the interviews and draw out the best sort of takeaways, all that kind of good stuff. And I cannot wait to hear some good notes, takeaways. I'll be taking my own notes over here in this conversation with Nicole Hirsch from Lattice. So Nicole, before we get to some of that fun stuff, would you take a minute and tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me. So I've been in talent acquisition for over 15 years. I currently lead go-to-market and G&A recruiting for Lattice. So Lattice is a people management platform that's an absolute delight to use and helps you make the most of your talent. So before Lattice, I led go-to-market recruiting at Segment, the leading customer data platform, and we were acquired by Twilio. And prior to that, I led recruiting for a publicly traded education technology company. And I actually got my start in staffing during the financial crisis in 2008, which taught me a lot of lessons that I carry with me today, especially about interviewing.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to hear some of that fun stuff in the conversation. And I was telling you a minute ago before we start recording that I've actually been following the Lattice team for a while. So I respect the work they're doing there around performance and development and all those kind of good things. But we were actually introduced by our friends over at Bright Hire. So I'm excited to dive into some of those things, really talk about the interview piece. And just to give us a little bit of a shot across the bow to get you introduced to the audience a little more. What is something that you or your team has accomplished in the last year or two that you're really proud of when it comes to TA overall?
Yeah, absolutely. My team and I, and this includes my broader people team, not just the talent acquisition team, we've put a lot of time and research into our approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how we approach this in the talent acquisition process. So we spent time upfront researching what other companies are doing. Companies similar to us, companies significantly larger than us, companies a little smaller or earlier stage than we are. And just like us, all companies have constraints, even the biggest ones. Resource restraints, regulatory restraints, especially around this topic. So the approach that we decided to take after doing this research is using predictive analytics to monitor and evaluate the diversity of our pipeline composition. So what's really encouraging is that through this research, we've demonstrated we've minimal to no bias in our pipeline pass-through rates. And that's allowed us to focus our talent acquisition efforts on the top of our funnel. We've also implemented, as a part of this entire body of work, an interview for our leadership roles earlier this year. And that is focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as well as leadership and values. So this is all ongoing work for us. This is not work that it's like, okay, we're done, we did it. But it's built so much confidence in our hiring process, and it's added data to demonstrate our focus and our intention in this area.
You know what's interesting is later on at the event here, I'm actually going to be sharing some of the research we have. And one of the things, you have no idea, by the way, you've never even seen this, you don't know what I'm about to say. But for the audience's benefit, one of the things that we're going to share in there is that high-performing TA teams, ones that are proactive, not just reactive, trying to keep up with things, but proactive, leaning forward, looking at how they can partner, they're twice as likely to be using analytics when it comes to measuring when diverse candidates fall out of the pipeline and what sort of things they can do to keep them connected there. So y'all are right on target with that piece and really leaning in. That's so thrilling. Awesome. Fun. Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you something there. You talked about interviews for leadership roles specifically. Y'all have something woven in. Talk about what it looked like before maybe, and then how this fits into that leadership selection, vetting sort of pipeline that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be a common theme that I think we're going to talk about today, Ben. And that is that the interview process is not just for the company or the hiring team or the hiring manager. The interview process is very much for the candidate as well. So taking a step back, Lattice previously did a values interview, and we still do a values interview, and it's based on our 4 core values that we're very proud of, and they're very distinct to us. So we have this values interview that's a part of every single interview process that we do. We made a decision that we wanted to be more active, especially in our leadership roles. And there's a chance we might expand this into some of our other roles. But we started off and saying, let's pilot this, let's figure this out, let's see how this works with our leadership roles specifically. So we took our existing values interview, and we also looked at what we wanted to come across to leadership roles, directors, vice presidents, senior vice president, even C-level roles from a diversity perspective. And we wrote a series of questions that took all of this into account. And these questions were written by a combination of folks in leadership, but led by our director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this interview that we have created, it's not only for us to have a conversation with candidates in the interview process, but it's also for candidates to get to know us and get to know how we view diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as a company. So it's really designed to be a two-way street and to create that conversation from the very, very beginning points. So we're setting the expectations for what employment is going to be like, especially as a leader at our company.
Okay, I like that. I'd spend a lot of time talking about setting that high bar for what we expect from leaders, not just saying, well, don't do these things over here because bad stuff will happen. Like, we're spending all our time on the minimum threshold, but never talk about, but if you want to be great here, here's what we want you to aspire to. We'll give you some high marks for that. Yeah, I like that. Okay. So I'm going to jump over just a little bit, because one of the things that we see in the data, we've been doing some research on interview screening and how to bring in the right candidates and how we actually discern who's the right person for the job. And one of the things that comes out of that, probably no surprise, is like one of those, yeah, genius, we knew that. Like, when we actually prep and train people to interview well, the hiring outcomes are better. They're less likely to pick the wrong person. They're less likely to be biased. They're more likely to pick the person who's going to perform better on the job. All that kind of stuff pops out there. And no one that heard that just now is surprised by that. And yet we see in the data that a lot of employers still don't actively and intentionally develop and support and enable their hiring leaders to be better at interviewing. And so we're like, yeah, we know that's true, but we're not actually doing anything to make that happen. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about that? You're like, spot on. That's a little off. Here's what we find. I'd love to hear just your take on that. And then maybe we could talk about the practical side of how to actually do that well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited to talk about the practical part, but first and foremost, it's 100% spot on. There is this something that's out there, is that people with interpersonal skills don't need to plan for or prepare for or practice interviewing. Interviewing is a skill just like anything else. You don't get good at anything unless you're really gifted, and that's great. But that doesn't mean that you can't get better without practice. Full stop. Think about any activity, whether it's a physical activity or a sport, or even think about it as something else that we might do as a hobby. You get better through practice, through repetitions, through having a plan and following that through. That doesn't mean that you always stick to that exact plan. That doesn't mean that there's not some deviations along the way, but it's about practice and repetitions and doing that over and over again. That's how we get better. And that's how we build intuition. Intuition doesn't come when you first start something. So, yeah.
I'm thinking, this reminds me of the common sort of fallacy around sales. Like, someone who's really talkative makes a good salesperson. Like, not always. A good listener makes a good salesperson, but a good talker might talk over the person when they're about to give you the signal for what they're going to potentially buy. And the same thing probably carries over into recruiting overall, but also into interviewing, where just being able to talk, just being conversational, just being able to talk to a brick wall over here and just have a chat with, that doesn't mean that you're actually listening, that you're trying to make this, like, I love the two-way street you said a minute ago, because we're giving and we're getting during that process. And if the candidate doesn't feel like they're getting anything back, they're just getting grilled the whole time, that sets us apart for the wrong kinds of reasons in the interview process. So, okay, I'm totally with you on that. What are your thoughts on you got something else to share?
So consistency and planning, those are absolutely key. It doesn't matter how skilled of an interviewer you are, without a plan and without consistency, you will not have positive hiring outcomes. You might get lucky here and there, but you will not have consistent positive hiring outcomes without these things. So what does that mean? Because basically what I'm saying is, one of the worst things that you can do as an interviewer is to wing it. So starting from the very top, you need to have competency-based interviewing. And to have competency-based interviewing, you need to have competencies for the job. So that's first and foremost. And then basing all of your interview questions, even if it's across several interviews, doesn't have to all be covering every single competency in every interview. I'd actually advise against that. Having these competencies for the job. And then making sure that you've got these competencies well represented in the interview process, because otherwise what you're going to have happen is interview fatigue. And I'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
But the way to, so it's like, okay, how do you, I've got my competencies. This is what is necessary to be competent and then to succeed in this job. Great. Then what? Well, then you need to have interview questions. So how do you have interview questions? Well, ideally you want a mix of both behavioral interview questions and situational interview questions. And that gets to what you were talking about earlier, Ben, as well, about how do you get to what are your top 3 strengths versus what actually makes this person tick. And these behavioral questions give you the opportunity to understand how people have responded to situations in the past, recognizing that probably no 2 situations are going to be exactly the same. It gives the person who you're interviewing the opportunity to tell a story, to explain what situation they were in, how they responded to it, what happened, what was the result, what did they learn? And that's going to also open up to a lot of follow-up questions and the opportunity to really get deep between the interviewer and the candidate. And that's really where the magic happens. And any talented interviewer, whether they are a recruiter, a talent acquisition leader, an executive, or just a frequent interviewer, they're going to tell you that that's where the magic happens. It comes from asking a question and continuing to ask a follow-up question. How did you respond to that? What was the response? What did you learn? What would you do differently? Those follow-up questions, that's where you see, because if someone in that is kind of BSing their answer, they're probably going to lean out from the interview question a little bit. They're probably not going to have really good responses for you, right? They had their canned responses and maybe they're out. But the qualified candidate, the person who's well matched to the role that you're interviewing for this particular behavior, they're going to lean in. They're going to say, even if they were, a little bit light on some of those other things.
Oh, I can't wait to tell you about this. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then I did this and then I did that. And even someone who, this is not about being extroverted or introverted, because even the most introverted person, when you strike on these things and you ask them follow-up questions, you truly allow them to be heard, that's when they will lean in. And that's when you get that really good signal about how qualified someone is to be able to do this competency, this job.
Excellent. I'm literally making notes over here as we're talking because I'm getting some good stuff from this. One of the things that you talked about, like, don't wing it, actually prep, actually plan. It's a lot harder to do an interview right than it is to do it quickly and fast, right? I thought of I'm going to butcher it, the old saying that's like, if you got an hour to cut down a tree, spend the first 50 minutes sharpening your axe, basically, like make that last little bit count. Instead of saying, okay, I've got 10 minutes for the interview. Like, what am I going to ask Nicole? What did I ask the last person? I'll just change those questions up, or I'll go Google some questions to you. No, take a little bit more care and concern with that, because what happens in the interview is going to ultimately drive the decision you make for who to hire. And if you give it half effort, you're going to get half results or worse.
Exactly. So then how do you actually do that?
Yes.
And this is where the partnership piece comes in. And this is what's really important. If the hiring manager does everything, if the recruiter does everything, this is where the partnership piece comes in and really makes some magic happen. You get the best outcome with a blend of the recruiter or talent acquisition partner and the hiring manager designing the interview process, the interview loop, if you will, and the interview questions. That allows for the hiring manager to contribute what they know about their team, the design of their organization, the future of their organization, not just what they need for the next 6 or so months, but what they need for the next year, 18 months. What do they see from 3 years from now? If they, can look around the corner that far about what's next, not just for their organization, but how their organization contributes to the business. And then you bring the recruiter's expertise of, okay, well, these types of questions will get us this type of an outcome. We've tried doing this in this other interview, and this is what we've seen. So bringing this combination of expertise together is going to get you the best possible outcome. It's this like better together type of mentality.
Would you recommend like a strategy meeting, something else before the interviews? Not necessarily for every single one of them, but before the interview sort of begins, before this whole block begins for this hiring position, just like we had an intake meeting to get the rec posted and start the vetting early on, should we have a separate sort of conversation about this that says, okay, These are the right questions to ask, just like you were saying, like, I'm going to layer these in, you're going to layer those in. Here's what that's going to look like. We're going to bake a great cake together because we got all the right ingredients. Is that what you would recommend, or is there a better way to do that?
I've just been looking at my notes, Ben.
Oh,
So
okay.
absolutely. So
I'm peeking over the edge of the screen here. Here we go.
So we call that a pre-cap meeting. And a pre-cap meeting, ideally, so you design this interview, right? So this recruiter and this hiring manager design this interview together, you write questions. And then the other thing that becomes really helpful is even asking for feedback. If you are asking an interviewer to contribute, also asking them for their expertise. If you've got an interviewer who's focused on cross-functional collaboration, or if you've got an interviewer that's focused on some technical aspect that they have the most expertise in, you want to write some questions for them, but then you also want to go and ask them for their input when you can. And a pre-cap meeting is best case scenario. I want to be really honest about the fact and realistic about the fact that you're already asking these folks as a part of your interview team for some of their time, right? This may or may not be on their team. This is probably going to be a role that they work with, but you're already asking for some of their time. So best case scenario, absolutely. You do a pre-cap meeting, you send a pre-read, say, here's the job description, here's what we're looking to find in this interview. This is the signal that we're looking for. Here are the 2 competencies, interviewer, that we're going to ask you to focus on. Because, by the way, if you don't do that, then every single interviewer is going to ask probably the same set of questions and get who knows what kinds of responses. And then that's when you get that interview fatigue that I was talking about earlier. Now, if you can't get everybody together in the same room, even for 15 minutes, that's okay. Honestly, an email or another type of message will do, whether you use Slack or Teams or whatnot. And you can send out this message and say, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for contributing to our interview process. Here's what you're going to be focused on in this interview. Here are all of the details that you have. Oh, and by the way, all of your interview questions will be in the applicant tracking system. That's the other piece that's absolutely critical. Every interview question needs to be in the applicant tracking system, so that way everyone can take notes specifically there and take notes consistently from candidate. Candidate, exactly.
Okay. I want to ask you 47 other questions, but I know we're getting close on our time. Anything we didn't cover that you're like, oh, this is my one last killer tip, or anything you want to double down on, like just do this thing if you could do nothing else before we wrap up?
Well, the one thing, if you can, and if you have the resources to do it, I mentioned that we started partnering with BrightHire, and BrightHire it's a tool that records and transcribes interviews. And I got to be honest, there was a lot of hesitation across our business for recording interviews. And now that we've been using it for a little over 6 months now, people love it. It transcribes interviews. It allows you to be present as an interviewer in the moment with your candidate, and to not have to be furiously typing notes. I like to capture everything. And the fact that I know I've got a backup of something capturing notes for me, that's a nice to have. I would say it's an awesome tool. If you can do it, try it out. I promise you will get a lot more buy-in than you expect that you will. But I will tell you what is an absolute must do every time, and that is debriefs. Okay. And debriefs are so underrated, and they are so important. They're a little complicated sometimes, getting everyone together. What if all the scorecards were positive? What if they were all negative? You still have something to learn from a debrief. So expectations for debriefs, set them up front. Set it in that pre-cap meeting that we are going to debrief. And we'll batch them together if we can, and we're going to do them in a timely way. But your expectation, interviewer, is to get your scorecard filled out thoroughly and on time within 24 hours. And recruiter, your expectation is to be prepared to read through these scorecards, put together themes, ask questions. This is not just a recap of the interview. This is looking for areas where we have conflicting signal, where people got differing points of view on this same candidate. And it allows us to say, what is it that we need to either uncover in later interviews, or is there anything else about our interview process that we need to adjust? So debrief. Even if it's short, do them.
I think that's a great reminder that this is a process. Ultimately, it's a lot of humans involved. It's a lot of interaction involved, but we're trying to pick the right person, and we're trying to make sure they know enough about us to know if they want to pick us as an employer. And at the end of the day, that's what the ultimate goal of this whole thing.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a blast. I'm going to make sure and I'll tag you right here in the comments so everybody can connect with you on LinkedIn. Y'all let Nicole know that y'all enjoyed hearing her, learning from her and her insights, what they're doing over at Lattice. Thank you again to the Bright Hire team for putting us together. And Nicole, you're a treasure. Appreciate your time.
Likewise, Ben. Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. To everybody else, hang tight for more good stuff coming right up. I love how practical and focused some of these conversations are, like getting back to the nuts and bolts of, we can talk about these big ideas or themes, but ultimately, if we want to be successful, we've got to help our people know how to connect with someone to interview. Don't do something that turns them off immediately, all that kind of stuff. George, that was your first time hearing Nicole. What was your takeaway or your moment where like, that's my thing?
The thing that really I connected with was that the values interview. Ben, I think the importance of having those value interviews are important for a few reasons. One, because you made me a data king, or maybe I'm just a data prince. And one of those questions that really stuck with me in our piece report is how important it is for companies' workplace cultures to align with your personal values and beliefs. And the huge difference, especially for those who said it fully aligned, it was 2 times more likely to say it's very important for me to have my personal values aligning with the company's culture as well as their values. So understanding that value interview and what it can do for a person when you go into an interview saying, I value your personal values, but I also want to share our company's values. What does that look like? Do these align? Because when you understand what somebody's values are, even if they don't fully align with the company values, I think there's a lot of synergy that can be met there in the middle where there's some things that can really connect the values that the company has, your personal values, and how we can work those together. Because when employees feel valued, right? We talk about the engagement. We talk about employee fulfillment as the new employee engagement. We talk about employees want to have a sense of belonging within the workplace, and it's all directly tied towards their leader. When we talk about these things, man, it's truly coming down to the root and the foundation of, do you care for this individual, right? And that's what people want. People want to be somewhere where they're cared for and they feel that there's an importance, not necessarily be spotlighted or put on some pedestal, but just the respect factor that I respect you and I respect your values. I mean, it may be a little bit different. We are different people. We all are. We have different perspectives in life. And it's one of those things that, although I may disagree with some of those things, I will respect those things because of what you believe in. It's the whole, how do I get to know you factor that's so important in that. And so I think that really, really connected with me. Another thing that she said that really connected me was the whole planning and consistency. And this is something that I have to stick to, especially when I had the retail stores back in 2014 to 2018. We had 18 locations. When I didn't plan or was consistent, I was that knucklehead that got in trouble. Because you may say some things that you probably shouldn't say, or may veer off the road a little bit. That the whole consistency, going back to the first segment of storytelling, there's something in that as well.
Goodness, there's so much good stuff there, and I love the really doubling down on, we've got to see people and know that they're not just this resume, this collection of skills, but there's something, their values that are behind that, and seeing and recognizing and appreciating that, even if we don't share every single one of the same things, right? I was going to make a
We're different. I think it comes down to what she said. Yeah, she said it best. Let them be heard, right? Maybe different, but let the voice be the voice.
Good stuff. Okay. I've got looks like our AV issues ironed out, at least as far as our next session is concerned. So we're gonna have Thad Price and Talru come back. Let's see if that one was gonna work properly this time. Fingers crossed. The other thing, my LinkedIn, I keep another tab open, kind of watching what's going on during the session and commenting and chatting with you and everything else. If yours is freezing up like mine has been, refresh. I've also posted into the chat. We have the YouTube and the Facebook link in the chat, so you can go right over there. For whatever reason, they don't hang up nearly as often as LinkedIn does. I don't know what the deal is with LinkedIn. Let's get it together. Come on, people. So if you get frozen up, just hop over there. You'll still be able to participate. You can still comment. We can see your comments. We can feature them here on screen like we have been for the rest of you. And so you still participate in the conversation. Get credit in the end when we do some giveaways and things at the very end. All right, let's dive into this and hear from Thad Price.
I am so excited to be here with
So this
you.
battle
I have
card
an amazing,
idea, I think, is
longtime
really
friend of mine.
All right, so I've messed that up again. Okay, I'll have one more try at this, and I'll come back to you shortly on that one. So I'm going to play my other speaker here that we've got, and then I'll fix that yet again. I'll have him all set up. I'll owe Thad a big high five and a hug after this is done. So our other session we're going to play here is with Joe Motter and Angela Pointer. We're going to hear from them about how Angela and her team at Centera Health create connections. They do something unique that I think all of us can probably learn from, where they have this sort of a forum where they get their recruiting team together and they talk about what their priorities are and how they're addressing that for the coming year. So there's some really good stuff there from Angela we're going to hear about. And Joe is an old friend. I know you'll appreciate hearing from him as well. So let's go ahead and get this one up and running. Hey everyone, welcome back to another session here at the TA Trends live stream today. I know you're enjoying some good insights, some good ideas, some good stories from practitioners and leaders in the space. We've got some more of that coming for you right here. So I'm so excited to have Joe Motter here. He is a longtime friend from Brazen. They're supporting the event today, as well as Angela Pointer from Centera Health. And so we're going to be talking about some things like candidate experience. How do we really connect with the people we're trying to serve as candidates, and how do we make sure we're elevating, supporting our recruiters? All that good stuff in the conversation. We'll try to pack this all together in the time we have available. So Joe, Angela, welcome to you both. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us, Ben.
Yes, for sure. So before we get started, Angela, give everybody a quick snippet of who you are and what you do, and then we'll pass the ball over to Joe before we dive into our questions.
Sure. I am Director of Talent Acquisition at Centera Health. We are an integrated health system composed of 12 hospitals, 30,000 employees, headquartered in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. And I have responsibility for a lot of things, including recruitment for the areas that I am responsible for and leading the team, as well as recruitment marketing, advertising, benchmarking, process improvement, executive recruitment, diversity, community, military recruitment, all of those things. So I don't twiddle my thumbs.
Oh, goodness gracious. If you did, you're missing out on something else, twiddling those thumbs. Okay, wonderful. Great to have you here, Angela. Joe, tell us your story really quick.
And thanks for having us. But yeah, Joe Motter, VP of Marketing at Brazen, which was recently acquired by Radency, but that's for a different conversation. For those of you that are not familiar with Brazen, we're a market-leading hiring event platform. So my first job is to help market Brazen to the world, but probably a close second is working with our customers and really the talent acquisition community to kind of think about better ways to connect and engage with candidates. And that's why I'm so excited to be here today, and really to be here with Angela, who is a Brazen customer who is doing just some incredible things in the world of creating incredible candidate experiences and journeys. So thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Glad to have you, Joe. All right. So Angela, one of the things you and I were chatting about a little bit before we started recording is you mentioned that you were not always in the TA function. You started out in an entirely different role. Would you tell everybody that story really quickly? Because I want to ask you a follow-on question from that, if you'll give us that quick background.
Sure. So I tell people all the time that I'm the poster child for all the things you can do as a registered nurse that's non-traditional. This year makes year 26 as a nurse. So obviously I started when I was 2, but of that 26 years, 18 months was that traditional bedside nurse experience. Loved it, was happy to undo that for that time. But for the past 17 years, I have been in the space of recruiting and now leading recruitment teams. So it certainly wasn't on my bucket list. Going to college and majoring in nursing, never thought I would be leading recruitment, but I have found my niche and loving every single day of it.
Well, the reason I asked that question for the audience to get that background is I would imagine many of them who have a TA bent to them are also probably have touched the work that they are recruiting for at some point potentially. And I want to ask you this question: as you have recruiters on your team who are probably all former nurses in some cases, do you think having that experience in the trenches as a practitioner before they step over into the recruiting side makes them more effective, more capable, more able to identify with the people they're trying to recruit?
Interesting question, and you kind of hit a hot spot
Okay.
in the subject of talent acquisition. So, probably contrary to maybe popular belief, these days and times, we're a limited commodity in terms of registered nurses who are recruiting today. There used to be kind of a thought process in the world that in order to recruit for nurses, you needed to be a nurse. And there are some organizations, I've been a part of organizations that was a requirement to be a nurse recruiter. One thing that I would say is that while there's certainly a benefit to having some clinical background, I wouldn't say that it's a requirement. On our team of 74 people in talent acquisition, I'm the only registered nurse. We do have one other individual who LPN by background. So it's not as common now as it used to be in terms of having clinicians. So I do think there's definitely a benefit, but it also can be learned, because I also will be here to tell you that just because you're a nurse doesn't mean you're a great recruiter. I can't really tell you about the days and day in and day out of being a labor and delivery nurse. Never been there, done that. So I think also it's important to note that, well, do you have to be a pharmacist to recruit pharmacists, or do you need to have an MBA to recruit for positions that require an MBA? So I think there's a certainly element to having some understanding, and definitely those that are clinical can do that, can have that component to it. But I think the other thing is it's learned. One of the things that I'll kind of get into maybe when you talk about this, particularly in healthcare recruiting, while you may not have a clinical background, it is helpful to get in there and kind of get to know what you're recruiting for. I always tell people you need to touch it, breathe it, smell it. It really adds to your ability to both sell the organization, sell the department, sell the position, when you have that understanding of having been in the trenches, so to speak. And then it also helps to build that rapport with your hiring leaders, because then you build that trust, so that you're not just, I'm not your recruiter order taker, just fill it, give me a rec and I fill it, but I'm your partner in finding top talent.
Oh my goodness, we could probably spend half an hour on that alone.
Oh yes, we could. Yeah, as you guys know, I kind of can already see I have a bit of the gift of gab. So especially when I'm talking about things that I'm very passionate about.
Well, Joe knows my story. I started out as a recruiter for Black Hawk instructor pilots. And so same kind of thing. I've never flown one. I've ridden in one, and that's as close as I've gotten to actually having any competency there. But you start to learn the language. And I think you touched on some things like being willing to be curious, ask, always be learning. Even you, when you stepped over and started recruiting nurses, you're like, I'm going to run across people that have different sets of experiences than I have. So I think that's a good call out, that you don't have to necessarily do that. I didn't know what you would say, honestly. So I think that's a great answer to that piece. Okay. So one of the things I want to ask you about is, as you think forward into the coming year, priorities to your team, things like that, I'd love to hear from you. What role does candidate experience play in that? Do you think that's like top of the list? That's no, we've got other things we're focusing on. That's kind of an accidental byproduct. Where does that fit in your list of priorities for the coming year? Because I think that a lot of people listening in here are curious about that. We hear a lot about it, and yet it's one of those things that captures a lot of pieces of the hiring process, and it's hard to nail down sometimes. What are your thoughts?
Yes, so I can say a lot here, but I'll try to be brief. But absolutely, customer, candidate, consumer experience. Me personally, that is kind of it's really the root of what we're doing right now, as well as into the future. We're living in a land this is the land of consumer, period, right? So it's all about our experience in whatever area. Like I could talk about stories of I don't know if I can say the name or not, but a very popular app we use for shopping. So, I'm on there quite a bit. And so that experience, we're living in a world that it's all about how can that experience be quicker, faster, more efficient. And so from that standpoint, that is something that we're really excited about. I will say this, for those listening, I don't have there's no secret sauce. So I don't think anyone has the magic bullet or the answer, but we're all striving towards that. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, something we did about 6 months ago on National Healthcare Recruiter Day, we had our first, I think it's going to be now annual retreat with our 74-member team. And the theme for that was ICE, ICE, and that's creating incredible customer experiences. And what we focused on that day was looking at the customer from 3 perspectives. And one of them is the candidate. Of course, so those are the individuals that will be joining our organization, future Terra team members or future team members that you'll be recruiting. It's also the hiring manager. And then also one piece that we forget about too is each other. I mentioned that we're a very large talent acquisition team, and how we relate and interact with each other is important as well. So of those ICE, one of those components is around that candidate experience. So that is something that we are working on. What things can we do now? Because like I said, I don't think we have the secret sauce. There are opportunities, there's areas that we can do to make the experience seamless. That is one of the things personally with Centera. We are on our own strategic journey. And a part of that is our looking at the consumer from the standpoint of those who receive care, as well as we also have the health plan side as far as paying for care. So from that perspective, we're definitely becoming more consumer focused as an organization. And so it actually just makes sense from a standpoint of talent acquisition, from the candidate experience, even from those individuals who apply for positions, whether they get hired, or for those that may not be hired for a position, but everybody knows somebody. And so your experience, and we all know this, if someone has a great experience, they'll tell people. But if someone has a not so great experience, they'll tell people too. And, we have to be mindful from that component. So I would say that absolutely we're in the season of the consumer and candidate experience. Like, how easy is it to even find your jobs? How easy is it to connect? Because I think we're moving away from actually the people and the human component sometimes, because we're in the space of virtual, which is wonderful. And a lot, we can do things. I tell people all the time, I used to say you can't build relationships behind a desk, but I would also say you can't build relationships solely from behind a screen. But it's being able to interact with people at their level, at their level of comfort with wanting to be contacted. We're also in this land of instantaneous feedback, and people want to hear things like, I applied today and I want to know in 2.5 seconds whether you've seen my application or not. So that kind of component too, of what is it that we can do to make that experience as seamless, as connected, and as personal, even, because sometimes it gets very impersonal. You apply for a position, almost every ATS and every system has this that I call almost surgical response sometimes, that we received your application, versus, and that dear first name, if for some reason your thing isn't working, and then you get that thing goes out to dear first name instead of the person's real first name. So like really being able to have that personal connection of feeling like you're being able to connect with someone. So I know that was probably a long-winded answer to your question, but I'll pause there for the sake of time.
That's okay. I like that. I like that you brought on some specific things, right? The connection, the building relationships, how easy it is to find a job, things like that. I don't think about that kind of thing often because I'm not job seeking, but I have friends occasionally like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And I'm like, oh, well, here's a good company I know. I'll go look there. And sometimes it takes me like 10 clicks to even find out where the jobs are. And it's like the ultimate spinning circle never loads thing. So I get you there. Joe, you actually had the chance to watch this with an outsider's perspective, this event that Angela's talking about that they had for their TA team. What was your take on that? Angela, you can cover your ears for a second so you don't hear this. What was your take on that from the outside perspective?
Tell me how horrible it was.
I'm sure the team was probably excited to be together, because that thing doesn't often happen for a lot of TA teams. You don't have the chance to actually come together and be excited together.
No, the retreat that Angela and team put together was absolutely fantastic. There was so much energy and, just information sharing, similar to what we're doing today. I mean, I think each person on the talent acquisition team for Centera has something to share with the rest of the team that's going to level up how everybody performs. And I thought that was really fantastic to see. And yeah, I think that I could tell, obviously, from the theme of the retreat, namely that it was ICE, incredible customer experience. But, just from listening to the conversations and listening to everybody present or engage during the retreat, that the Centera team really does put candidate experience first, and hiring manager experience and recruiter experience. Like all three of those, they're really focused on. And I just remember a story from, I can't remember if it was you, Angela, or someone else on your team, just thinking about how a world-class patient experience starts with a world-class candidate experience. That was something that I think bubbled up to the top. And I know, Angela, you get motivated by helping the people that help people, right? And so I see those parallels. You were talking about the consumer experience and patient experience, and the modern job seeker, the modern consumer, they want the best, right? Removing friction. They want empathy. And that's something I also heard from your team too. You asked before, Ben, does a recruiter have to have been in the role previously that they're recruiting for. And I think Angela's right, like not necessarily, but what I think every recruiter needs is empathy. Like put yourself in that job seeker's shoes.
Perspective.
Like what is that? What is that experience like? You said, you know, Ben, you've looked at career sites where it takes 10 clicks just to find the jobs or get to the application. And so, you know, these were just some of the themes that I took from the retreat, from Centera's, you know, candidate experience conversations.
Excellent.
Thank you, Joe. I will say, let me, for full disclosure, I don't think we're, you know, the greatest thing since sliced bread, as they say, or I'm from the South, I say bowl of grits. But I do think that, you know, we're working on it. We have a great team. We have some wonderful leaders and that I get the privilege of working with, as well as our recruiters. And we are definitely moving forward with things that we can do to improve the candidate experience.
I want to derail things, but Angela, now I want a bowl of grits. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Oh, I did. Oh yeah, because it's kind of interesting because some people are like, oh, what? Yeah, but you know, that's what I was raised on. So
hey, if you're not from the South, you should give it a try. A little bit of butter, a little bit of sugar, it'll go a long way. There we go. All right. So one of the things I want to ask you about, Angela, is again, as you've already said, you don't have it all figured out, but you're open about that, and you're like, there are some things you're probably doing well, or things that you like, hey, this has worked out really well for us, and others probably could use this same kind of practice. So I'd love to hear from you. Anything on that front that you might have to share that's a practical takeaway, suggestion, strategy, anything like that that you want to lay out. And Joe, I'm going to come to you next because you get a chance of seeing not just what Angela and Centera are doing, but across this whole range of customers and companies. So I'm going to come to you next and expect some gold from you. But Angela, what you got?
Okay, so I would say, particularly from the perspective of the TA leaders, because now I've been leading teams for quite a number of years, and I think it's really important for us as TA leaders to understand. I think I may have said, I say this in my tagline, that as a leader, I'm privileged to be the people that lead the people, to find the people, to take care of the people. And notice I said the word people 3 times, and I think that is for emphasis to understand. It's really all about people, whether it be from a patient perspective, the patients, their families, from a candidate perspective, but also from a recruiter perspective. And I think it's important. We hear this word a lot. People are throwing out servant leadership. I mean, if I hear that one more time, that's the buzzword that folks talk about. But one of the things that I'll say that I subscribe to from that perspective is it's not about a title, and it's not about, because there are many people that have a title that are true leaders, and then many people that aren't true leaders, but they have a title. And I'm gonna let that sit where it is right now. But my perspective here is that it's really all about the people, because as a leader, you're a leader of people. And like in my case, I'm not recruiting all day, every day, but I am leading people who lead people that are doing that. So I think it's important to understand that it's about the people. And if you're in number one, you need to show that you care and that you mean that you're there to support your team. And I think that is so important, especially in this world, in this age right now. Recruiting is not for the faint of heart. It is not an easy job. Some people think that because many recruiters now work from home and work remotely, that you're just sitting around with your feet up and drinking bomb whatever. It is not an easy job. And so just really understanding that you're there for your people and you're there to empower them. Because when people are motivated and they feel supported and they feel like they're empowered, it just makes so much of a difference in how we're going to perform. And so I think that's important, just to understand, first of all, it's about the people. And if you give the people, care about the people, give them what they need, they'll be able to produce.
One of my favorite sayings, I read the first book I ever read after college, intentionally and willingly, where no one made me do it. One of the sayings from that book that stuck with me all these years is the way that our employees treat customers will never be better than the way we treat our employees. And so I'm seeing that through your lens of a TA leader running a team, saying my team will never support those candidates to the degree they should if I'm not supporting them first. And so that was my big takeaway from what you shared there. Excellent. I'm glad you brought that in specifically, by the way, because I was expecting something like TA strategy or data or something else, but then you bring it back to hey, guess what? All that stuff doesn't even matter if you're not serving your team well. Right. They're not going to get all the other things done that you get done, and it's all going to fall back on your plate anyway.
Absolutely. So, I'll add one thing. There's I think it's Peter Drucker that said this, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. I always add that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. So I think it's really important that creating that culture of being people-centric well, then all the other components with data and analytics and all those things will fall into play.
Culture can have the strategy. I still want the grits. All right, Joe, what do you have for us?
I don't have any more grit analogies here,
Okay,
but
okay, I'm going to be slightly let down.
I will pick up on the people-centric approach that Angela referenced and her response. I think like it's really easy these days to get caught up in the automation and the chat bots and the processes, right? The technologies that help streamline processes, but none of that matters if you don't focus on the people, right? If you don't provide a way for connection and relationship building. And you talked about this misperception that recruiters have it easy, that they've got their feet up at home, drinking their coffee. And, the reality is, I think the reason why a lot of them get into this profession is because of the relationship building, because they want to build these relationships and help their organizations find the right people and help those people grow and develop, to help the organization grow and develop. And so I think it's really important, and this is what we see across our customer base, like finding a way. Yes, you have to scale things, you have to automate things, but don't forget about inserting your people into the conversation. That relationship building is something that's going to help you get that competitive edge, help you create that incredible candidate experience, because that's what job seekers want, right? What job seeker doesn't want to find that connection? That's what's going to help them understand more about the organization.
So glad both of you really brought that home for me. This is not about doing this at the expense or in lieu of the human connection. It's to build towards that human connection and to deepen that when that connection does come. Wonderful. All right. So this has been such a wonderful session. Time went so fast as I knew that it would. So I'm going to make sure and tag both of you here in the comments so the audience can reach out, connect with you, Angela, and you, Joe, on LinkedIn. I'll make sure and get your handles in there in the chat here. Thank you to both of you for joining us, for sharing your passion, your expertise, your insights, all 24 years worth of it, starting in 24 years ago, Angela, like you said earlier. And thank you both for hanging with us. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more good stuff coming right up next. Okay, I've really enjoyed hearing from Angela and from Joe on that one. And I'm going to plow right into our next conversation with that. I've tested it. Think things should be working properly. I guess we'll find out together in just a moment if that's true or not. We'll dive right into this next conversation because we have a couple more things to get to before we finish up today. We're gonna probably end up running just a little bit over. It's okay. It's worth it. So let's dive into this conversation with Thad Price from Talroo. You're gonna hear some similar conversation here on connections, and the way that Thad wraps it up, you are gonna love. It's gonna be really, really awesome. I am so excited to be here with you. I have an amazing and longtime friend of mine, Thad Price, here with me. We're going to be talking about some of the things that Talroo and the team there are seeing when they're serving their customers, helping them to hire at scale, hire lots of hourly people on a regular basis, consistently, all those good things. And we probably will talk about best practices, some of the things they're seeing that are competitive differentiators. I'm putting you up on like a high pedestal up here, Thad, by the way.
I know. I hope I live up to the expectation.
And he'll tell you the secret formula for the Coca-Cola. No, I'm just kidding. Before we get to some of the fun stuff, Thad, take just a second, tell the audience a little more about who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into the fun stuff on recruiting.
Yeah, hi, I'm Thad Price. I'm CEO here at Talroo, and we're a talent matching platform helping companies source and match frontline team members to help ensure that you're meeting your hiring objectives and growing your team.
Awesome. Straightforward there. Okay, when Thad is not doing that, not leading Talroo, what do you like to do, Thad?
My kids, center of my universe, all the things outside. Austin, who are here in Austin. Austin is a great place for enjoying, not this summer, it was brutally hot this summer, but there's a lot of ways which we can enjoy being outside and enjoy the Austin weather outside of the summer months.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. We actually came to Texas this summer right before school started. It was August and it's hot here in Alabama, but it was just, whoa.
It was
something
brutal.
Else. Something else.
It was a rough summer, that's for sure.
Yeah, goodness. Okay, wonderful. Well, good to hear. For a lot of people out there are like, oh yeah, go Austin or go kids or go outdoors. So you've got a lot of friends in your corner now. So I want to kind of just cast a quick net across things and just cast this wide. So you have a front row seat. You're working with a range of customers, serving these different employers, trying to serve and connect with candidates. And I'd love to hear from you. How do you think hiring has changed in the last year or two? Anything significant, different? What's been the big trend that you've been watching?
Well, I think the big thing that I would say is there's this constant theme of the job seeker strikes back. And what I mean by that is all of the ghosting and all of the lack of communication that unfortunately employers have, provided in the last few years. Now the tables are turning, and the tables are turning from a lot of ghosting that's happening from job seekers. And a lot of that is stemming from lack of communication, lack of quality of connection, the idea of volume and not the quality connection and the quality applicants that a lot of employers need to ensure they're achieving their hiring objectives. So I think there's a lot of that going on. And I think that we've learned a lot over the last few years, especially in the frontline and essential worker recruitment industry.
So what do you mean by quality of connection? Because I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, okay, well, we try to connect with people, but is there an actual way to measure that quality or understand that piece?
Yeah, so quality connection can mean a lot of different things. It's a new way for us to think about how we can connect candidates to great employers. And the first thing is the brand connection, right? When we think of your brand and we think of what people are saying about you as an employer without you being in the room, right? That is the actual definition of what your brand is. And that brand is so important in ensuring that you create raving fans for your employment brand. And it's so important, right? Can't undersell the importance of a brand. The second is the way in which we communicate, right? If we walked into a store and we asked for help and we didn't get a response back from any of the customer service professionals that were in that store, we probably wouldn't go back to that store ever again. And so how is applying for a job any different? And we've come a long way as an industry, but we still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of work to do to ensure that there is constant communication on application status. There's constant communication of, hey, did I get the job? Where am I? Is this black hole that we've been talking about for years? And so when we think about quality of connection starts with your employment brand. The second is the engagement that happens along the way as we connect with job seekers. How are we communicating? How are we sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly, whatever that is, through the application process? And the third piece is this idea of being competitive and understanding who we're competing against. And we think of this idea in product marketing around battle cards, right? When you think of looking at your product and comparing your product to another competitor in the market, there's this idea of battle cards. And the idea is all right, who am I competing with? And how can I ensure that I'm able to sell and close new business?
Yeah,
exactly. That applies to candidates as well.
So this battle card idea, I think, is really interesting because a lot of people probably heard that for the very first time here. How do you practically use that as a TA leader so that you're actually getting some mileage out of it? Because it takes a little time to invest in it, but you're going to get something back, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing you do is you understand who your competitors are in your location, right? So after you build that list, and a lot of our companies, what we advise is, hey, some of the competitors are competitors you're not thinking of. And a great example of that is some of the marketplaces, DoorDash, Lyft, Uber. You're competing, especially in our market, with high volume hiring and frontline hiring. So then after you've completed that list, then go look at Glassdoor reviews or any other reviews on any other system. And then you can find out what people don't necessarily like about your competitor. And then in your recruiting process, you can then use that to your advantage because you have to immediately think they've already applied for your competitor and they probably already read all of those reviews. So you can connect the dots for them and answer the question that they're thinking is, how is this opportunity different than your competitors and what's on the market today, given my alternatives? And so that's how I like to think about it, as a way to really answer the question before they even answer it to be more successful.
I love the practical application of that. And I'm so glad we dove into that on the battle cards. I think that's a really powerful point to make, that we think about, it talks about measuring quality of hire. We've done research that shows like that's the number one metric for TA leaders. Like, this matters more than all others. But if we don't have a quality connection at the beginning, quality applicants, and treating them well through the flow, guess what? You can try to measure all you want to on the back end, but you're not feeding the right things in from the very beginning and ushering that towards the right outcome. So I think that's a really great thing to say, hey, before they can become a quality hire, they have to be a quality applicant. In order to really get that in place, we've got to make sure we have the brand piece. We've got to be able to make sure we're connecting with them throughout the process. all the other kinds of stuff. There's lots of other data points that wrap around some of the things you were sharing there that are super relevant, backed up by the research, like the ghosting piece. 1 out of 2 candidates tell us that they have had a actual conversation with a recruiter or hiring manager and then just dropped off the face of the earth. The employer never contacted them again. It's not just I applied for the job and hear back, because that's the black hole thing is,
Right.
we can talk about like, okay, you can just hit the button that sends out a yes or no to everybody. But having an actual conversation, that's another threshold to say we at least owe them the courtesy of, hey, thank you for your time, but it's not going to work out. Or even a note to say, hey, we went another direction, anything, but just no contact at all. As you said, some of that we may be bringing on ourselves as employers, creating that problem for ourselves. Like, if I treat you that way long enough, you may start doing that back to me, and we're starting to see that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's rational behavior, right? Especially when you're in demand, especially when candidates are in demand.
So let's talk about that piece, because there was a period of time 18 months ago or so where hiring was more competitive than I've ever seen it in my entire working lifetime. I mean, it was like billboards everywhere with job prices on them. And I would imagine some of the things like job advertising was through the roof, all those kind of things. What is it like now? It's probably settled back down some, but to me, it seems like it's still higher than what it was like pre-COVID. It's going to remain there is my estimation, but I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, the last couple of years has just been blockbuster for hiring. When you think about the economies being shut down, state economies being shut down completely for months, then all of a sudden consumer spending is back, businesses are opening, turn the faucet on. We've got to make sure that we can ensure a certain level of customer service. All these things are very important, especially in where we spend a lot of our time in frontline and essential worker recruitment. So it's definitely not as competitive as it was, but it's still competitive. It's still, the trends are still strong overall from a talent acquisition perspective. And we look at the labor market in general. Things have settled down a bit, which is good for businesses because they can actually, ensure to make the hires that they're able to need to grow their business. And, the thing that I would say though, is there's still, if we think of all the ways in which, the economy will grow, so much of our economy is focused on small businesses. And, one thing that that it's important for us to take a step back and think about is because small businesses create so many of the jobs in the economy today, many of those small businesses are entrepreneurs and they are the chief everything. And if we are in a situation where the labor market is too tight, expansion won't happen if we can't, because that individual that's the chief everything officer, they don't have time in their day because they can't hire people, which means they can't go out and invest and open up a new location. So this is a very important to the overall economy. And I think that, we're still in a very tight labor market, but definitely not as tight as we've seen over the last probably 18 months.
Well, I'm glad you touched on like the smaller organizations, because I think there are people that are listening in here that are HR leaders, talent leaders at mid-sized companies, at smaller companies, and they probably don't have their own brand team internally. You're talking about brand a minute ago, right? As that being part of this, what advice would you give them when it comes to helping them stand out or helping them to be more competitive from a hiring standpoint? You talked about some things a minute ago, like the connections and things like that. But I think the brand piece, whether it's just being more consistent or if it's, find, you probably with the battle cards, maybe it's like know what they're doing so you can know how to stand out. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I'd love to hear from you on that.
I would say chat with your marketing team. If you have someone in your team that's focused on marketing, take them out to lunch, learn more about marketing and how you can be a more effective talent acquisition leader through leveraging marketing principles. I think that's one thing. The second thing is do the same with sales. If you have a sales team, a sales leader, recruiting is a contact sport, recruiting is sales, and talent acquisition is a lot of marketing. So all of these are connected. And I think we're going to continue to see this move in our industry to really thinking about talent as like closing a great deal in sales. It's unfortunately we don't, because if you think about it, talent acquisition is recruiting the leaders, the team members that will actually close the deals and grow revenue. So they're actually more important in organizations than closing deals and closing sales. Like recruiting and talent acquisition is so important and is really critical to the health of the organization because, great people grow great companies, and that's what it's all about. So I would say take them out to lunch, learn more, learn how you can think about, what they do and look at it through a different lens, look at your function through a different lens. The other thing that I would say is, be a sponge and look at, your process, take a step back, look at your recruiting process, look at all the stages within your recruiting process, just like you would look at a sales process. And then one tip that I would say that has been great for us, we're a small business here in Austin. And, one of the things that we did that has a low cost is we got pretty involved with the local business journals, so the local newspapers, media companies that have the best places to work, surveys that actually are provided. And what I always say is that if you have a chance to celebrate your brand, you have a chance to celebrate you as a unique company, have your team fill out, go through those survey processes, fill that out. And if you win, that's great branding for you as an employer of choice in a local market. And it doesn't cost anything, just your time to really focus on it. So that's one great tip for small businesses in ways you can actually start to elevate your employer brand in a small market, even a large market.
Yeah. Find your voice, right? And then, as you're saying, like really making that the great place to work piece. The way I always used to talk about that when I was running the HR department for our organization was like, this makes our culture visible. The answers people are giving, like we can think the culture is this or that as a leadership team, but the people are going to tell us what it really is. And then that's going to either appeal to the right people. It's going to push some people away. They don't want to work for a company that says, no, everybody's really accountable here. That's the thing we hold everybody to. That's going to push some people away. It's going to draw others in that really say, hey, I want to work for a company that's, like high demand, high driving, but also high achievement oriented, where you get that done and everybody's like celebrating for you. So like there's fun things there when you make that visible. I like that. One of the things we see in our research, you talked about one of these things a little bit ago, is quality of connection, thinking about the mechanics of your process, all those kind of things. One of the things that candidates tell us in the research is like, I want to see data on comp. I want to learn about development opportunities. I want to know about the company and not just what they do. We're in this industry, but what's their mission? What's the impact they're going to have? And so when I'm talking to talent leaders, I'll share some of this data later on today, actually, with the live stream. But when we talk to talent leaders, we're like, listen, these things are free to talk about this stuff that you're doing. Just sharing those things doesn't cost you anything, but you stand out from the crowd for the good reasons because you're transparent with candidates about the things that you care about. Have y'all worked with any clients that are doing that kind of thing? Or do you talk with that piece of it, really trying to share and be open about that kind of stuff outside of the culture bubble, more like the benefits or other things about working there?
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency is key. We built an algorithm a few years ago where based on your job posting, we will extract what's important out of your job posting and surface it earlier in the job search process for job seekers. And that's really important. So benefits, pay, all of these things. This was a few years ago. And so what we found is if we can actually qualify a candidate based on what they're looking for before we connect to the employer, that increases this quality of connection. They know what they're looking for. They know what's important to them. And so, we have seen that, any ways that you can be transparent in your process, ensure that you're actually sharing this in your job posting, you can create a better connection and drive more qualified applicants. So be transparent as much as possible. When you think about everything that you're offering, that's sales, right? And you know what? I would be transparent as possible, because if you're not, they're going to form their own conclusions reading Glassdoor or some other platform. So be transparent, right? Don't leave it open-ended. I think it's super important in today's environment.
There's a quote I used to have hanging up on my board when I first got a job as a recruiter, and it said, I'm going to butcher it now, but like, in the absence of communication is misinformation and mistrust, something like that. But basically,
absolutely.
If I don't tell you, your mind instantly goes to, Ben didn't answer the phone. He must be like, he must hate me. What did I do to cause this? Like, no, Ben was just busy picking up kids in school. It wasn't a big deal. But like, your brain instantly goes to the worst things, and the candidate's the same way. If we're not sharing those things, they'll assume, oh, it's because they're hiding something. It's because they don't have anything to share. It's because we're not doing the right things for other people. And you might be doing amazing things. We see this in all kinds of our research. One of the things that I shared with an audience last week was talking about recruiting, when I said, listen, how we retain people also matters for our recruiting. There's a data point that said if someone feels accepted, respected, and appreciated at work, which is the definition of belonging, if they feel like they're truly connected to the workplace where any of you out there listening to this are actually operating, then they're 5 times more likely to tell everybody they know about where they work, what it's like.
Yeah.
And so, like as you were saying a minute ago, like there are people they'll go check the glass doors and the other stuff like that. But we trust people around us, people who we know, people who we like, people who we respect. And if they're telling us, hey, listen, I work at this amazing company, even if you're good where you are, you hear someone else looking, you're like, hey, by the way, you ought to check them out. I heard good things about them. So we're like, turn all your people into recruiters too. There's all kinds of good stuff there.
You're absolutely right. And I think, what I've found to be very effective when you're recruiting, and most leaders, one of the number one things they spend their time on is recruiting. That's just how it is. Even if you're not in talent acquisition, you're always recruiting. You're either always selling or you're always recruiting. That's just how it goes. I would say that if you're not in it to change a life, then you should never hire in the first place. And I think so much of what we do is in the motion of, I need to fill this rec. I need to fill this rec. I need to fill this rec. And we don't do a good enough job of sharing the opportunity around how we're in the life-changing business. And that is your North Star. That is what we're doing. That was what's important to you, how we can turn your dreams into reality. All that's so important. And when you go at hiring and talent acquisition is, can I change a life? It's more than this rec. When you're thinking of inviting someone to join your company and you're giving them an offer letter, it's much larger for them, right? Maybe not for you. You may not think about it as a talent acquisition or leader or recruiter at that time, but you should be, because the candidate's thinking, I want to be successful. I want to advance my career. These are all the things that I hope this company can provide for me. And you've got to go at it as, I'm in the life-changing business, and how can I change your life? And you will be a lot more successful thinking about talent acquisition and recruiting if you're in the life-changing business.
Oh my goodness. There's no way to top that one. Okay. So I just want to give you like a high five virtually for that. I think that's a great way to wrap that up, and a great reminder for everybody listening in. We talked about a lot of the nuts and bolts and logistics and some of the key things you can do strategy wise, but if it all comes back to that piece, that you're going to end up okay. You're going to end up to the good if you start out from that impact. How am I impacting someone's life through this? Not just putting another butt in another seat and moving on to the next one.
And I think as an industry, we don't do a good enough job of sharing those stories. And that's part of brand. Brand building is about telling those internal stories where people have gone from, customer service to manager to director to leader. They've been there for 15 years, 10 years, 8 years. They built their career. That's how you celebrate success. And that is part of branding. And you've got to celebrate those stories because, your company did change a life, and it could be you as well.
That is one of the things I do call outs. Like, we don't always control the hiring decision, but we do control sort of the communications around elevating those stories, making sure those are visible outside the company, make sure those are visible to the other people who are at our company. Guess what? Like, we still want you. Just because you're here already doesn't mean we don't want you still. We want you to find another opportunity inside if possible. It's much cheaper for us. It's less risky, all the good benefits of hiring from within. So goodness. Okay. I didn't tell you this at the beginning, Thad, but we appreciate Talru for coming alongside us, supporting the event, making this possible for all of the leaders out there listening into this. So we'll give Thad and Talru a quick tag here in the comments so everybody can reach out, connect with him, follow the company and the work they're doing to change lives for the better. We appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ben. Take care.
Absolutely. To everybody else, hang tight for more good stuff. Okay, lovely, wonderful. It was worth the wait. I loved how Thad wrapped that session up, talking about really having the opportunity, the privilege, and maybe the responsibility of changing lives through recruiting, helping someone, and by extension, maybe their family, realize their dreams, their career hopes, all that good stuff. Okay, I'm going to transition right to this last session here. We're again a couple minutes behind, but good stuff here. I'm going to share some of the research with you, just a couple points, a couple ideas, try to make this very practical for you. There's some ideas in there on things you can do through your job ads, how you're interviewing, things like that, that costs you nothing and increases candidate responsiveness and interest in the roles that you have. So a couple good things coming to you here. And I'm joined for this one by William Tencup from Recruiting Daily. So let's dive in and make this one happen as I get this ready to do. Here we go. All right. Oops. Here we go on that. I know you've had a great time today at the live stream, got a lot of notes, got a lot of ideas from some of the conversations, and William Tencup from Recruiting Daily is here with me. We're going to go through and share some of the research we found. And I actually have William here kind of representing the audience a little bit with a sort of fresh take on things. So as we're going through, anything that comes in your mind, William, well, maybe not anything, but almost anything that comes in your mind, you're welcome to share that, comment, jump in. We've got about 20-25 minutes or so to share some of these things. And it's my hope that through this conversation, through some of the data points, we'll give the audience some things to help them think through how to recruit better in the coming year. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
Awesome. Let's dive into it. So a couple of things. I'm going to start off with a couple of things we found in the data. So we just finished a study recently. We talked to 500 different talent acquisition leaders, and we asked them across the board. There's a lot of different options and challenges and things facing right now. What are the biggest things? Is it volume? Is it quality? And so on. And so the biggest things, probably no surprise to anyone listening in here, lack of qualified candidates, the biggest thing, just trying to find the right types and kinds and skills and skill sets and everything else. It's a big priority. Lack of responsive candidates. I'll talk about ghosting in a little bit, but we found a lot of challenges with that. And a lot of employers saying, even when we get someone to apply, we're still trying to like pull teeth to get them to move on. And then last but not least, actually inexperienced recruiting teams was pretty high on the list. That surprised me as well. A lot of teams have had turnover, and to manage the cost, it's my guess here that employers are trying to bring in some junior recruiters to help offset the expenses of having a recruiting team in the past. But just having a lack of experience in the team, maybe they're new to the industry. All these things are creating this challenge though for employers that want to recruit well and want to find, convert, bring on the best candidates. Right now, they're struggling with those kinds of things overall.
So the lack of qualified candidates doesn't shock me, but I also wanted to caveat that for the leaders that when they think of that is, are they not as qualified because of how long it took us to get to them? So one of the things that I've noticed a lot, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, is candidates, not just hourly, but corporate candidates as well. They want to get a text. They want to get something immediately. Like if I send you a text, I expect you to send me a text, even if it's, hey, Will, totally locked down for the day. Can I talk to you tomorrow?
Yeah.
Great. That's fine. But I expect something to come back. That's the thing. And I think when I see number one, lack of qualified candidates, one of the things that it means to me is, okay, do we have speed nailed down? Are we as fast as we can possibly be as a team, as an organization? And that's a technology, that's a process, that's the team. That's basically kind of a mantra. We're going to get back with people fast. Now, if that's happening, and you still don't have qualified candidates, okay, then we need to start looking at different talent pools or way to harvest talent. And so then you start looking at all kinds of things like how do we build bridges with community colleges, or how do we look at building our own rather than the market providing. So I would want them to do the test first and say, okay, are you getting back to candidates in seconds, minutes, and hours, or is it days, weeks? And if it's days and weeks, then you don't have a lack of qualified candidates, or you can't know that you have a lack of qualified candidates until you have speed nailed down.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually the next thing I'll share is on that front. So we asked some questions around for candidates. So this is candidate responses here. Why are you ghosting employers? And you see, I have highlighted here, number 2 and 3 on this list are both related to speed, right? I took another job because you were too slow, or the process just kept dragging on. That 7th interview was overkill. Okay. So like I had to find something else. So
I have an engineering friend told the story, Ben. I think we talked about it actually last time we talked, is he's an engineer. He's about my age, so he's senior engineer, and he'll ask the recruiter first, okay, how many steps in this process? And if they say anything more than 4, he's like, yeah, I'm good. Just take me off your list. So again, it kind of depends on the talent, probably maybe even the age or maturity or the type of title or something like that. But what's also fascinating in this slide in particular is the job or company didn't interest me after I learned more about it. I actually think that's a good thing.
Yes, agreed.
So I look at that, even though the bar is longer than the other bars, I kind of look at that and go, that means that the job description, a careers page, and a recruiter. Well, we could have maybe front loaded some of that stuff and got and weeded those folks out a little bit earlier in the process. But okay, if they get weeded out at that point, that's still fine.
Yes. I want to find out before we make the offer or before they've been there for 2 weeks. Like I
Yeah.
want to find out it's not a fit as
Yeah.
early as possible so they can opt out of that, which again, that's, I'm always happy with that one. Again, number 2 and 3 related to speed.
I like this. What's next?
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you something else. So one of the things we did in our research this year is we actually did an experiment with candidates. We showed them 2 different job ads that you see here. The only difference is the phrasing at the bottom there. The candidates actually refer to the left one here 2 out of 3 times. And
what is it about that one?
So it's about mission. It's about like impact, right?
Yeah.
When we actually follow up with candidates, like why on this, it comes down to, I want to know more about the company and the impact I'll have. I don't want to just, again, to your point a minute ago, do a job.
In a perfect world, you basically make that's the next sentence after the one on the left. We're a market leader, because the market leader, one of the things we see in candidates today is they want to join quote unquote stable
safe
companies, right? So you've got 2 things in that sentence that make sense: market leader and worldwide. But I see why, after you explain it, it makes sense, which is fantastic. I mean, I'm jealous in a lot of ways of Gen Z, because they want to join something, even early stage. They want to join something that they believe in.
Yes.
I don't hate that. I actually think that's a great reason to join a company. Like, that's not a bad thing. When you and I came up, mine was probably harder than yours, but like, you just joined a company and you didn't know anything about like their mission statement or values or any of that stuff. It's like, yeah, I just got a job.
They'll have me. Okay, great. Hopefully the check clears on Friday. Like, we're good to go.
I applied to 4. One of them called back. That's it. Next. Like, why are we talking about it? But I actually I like both ads. I like the reasoning for why they picked A. But I think if we go further in time with the market being kind of this chaos around our economics, I think stability is going to be, at one point, stability will probably outweigh even in your values-based hiring.
Well, I've been telling employers this when I share this, I'm like, listen, you know how much this costs? Nothing. And yet, if we can do little things, small changes, small tweaks to increase the chance of a candidate responding to us, even before they've seen the job, this is just a job, ad that they see on the internet somewhere.
Right.
If we can start touching those things that they care about from that point, that's going to lead to better things overall. And for those that are struggling and don't have the money and everything else, that's going to give you some better results.
I mean, this is A/B testing, right? So this is just simple A/B testing, things that marketers have been doing for a long time. Let's just say the last 20 years in email marketing. And so you put, okay, everything's the same. The subject line is the same. Everything's the same. Just the body message is different. That's what's called single variable analysis. So you have one variable that's different. And why we don't do that with jobs and job ads, both on our career pages and Indeed and again, the digital ads that we put on LinkedIn, why aren't we A/B testing everything we do? Is shocking to me.
All right. So, goodness, I'm having so much fun. You're like a live test audience for me, by the way, even though everybody else is listening into it at the same time.
Yeah,
so
that's all right.
I have another one that I want to share with you. So I'm talking to employers in the last year or so, really encouraging them. Like the conventional wisdom is, oh, you should communicate more often with candidates, but we don't ever tell people what to be sharing, what they care about, what they want to know. And so we've been pulling some different data points from some of our different studies, one of them on the workforce and how they view flexibility at work. So I'll share that with you here. We said, what does flexibility mean to you as an actual employee? And where I work is what most of us think of in TA, because we're hiring and we're like, oh, sorry, this job's in person. Hello, are you still there? Hello. Like getting the drop off and when people find out to be at an office. And when we ask the actual workforce, what does this mean for you? It's number 4 on the list. Where I work, I think about, for any of you listening in out there, like bank teller, you've got people working in a warehouse, you've got people driving trucks on the road, whatever else, like those people, they don't have choices on the where.
Right.
But we can give them choices in these other things, like a little more autonomy in your daily work. Like you can make more decisions. You're still, as you said, William, accountable for this end result. But how you get there, we trust you. We hired you because we trust you. We're going to leave that to you. and give people some more options and flexibility there, that becomes a competitive differentiator when you're trying to talk to candidates and trying to compete in the market to say, listen, we don't just put you in this box and take all the trust away from you. No, we believe in you because we picked you. Then we let you go be great with us as your backstop to support you if you need something.
All the company cares about is coverage. They need somebody to be there to do whatever the job is. They don't care if it's Sally or John. They just need somebody to be there. And then the next day somebody can swap out. So I think the folks that have nailed that particular part of the kind of the value exchange are ones that are actually having a better chance of retaining talent, because they basically say, hey, listen, this is the schedule, but if you need to switch things around, just talk to your peers.
Yes.
Work it out.
Control there.
Yeah, you've got some control.
All right, so I've got one more for you, and
Sure.
I won't make you give your answer out loud if you don't want to. But when we finished our study on candidates recently, one of the things we asked was, how long does it take you before you know you want to stay at this company? And
this is from the candidate, from
yes.
the employee perspective.
Yes. So they're candidates like, hey, once you take a job at this company, how long do you think it's going to take you before you know you want to stay there or not? And
I think for Gen Z, I will split the power to it, because they grew up, they're digital natives. They've seen so much. They've been they can take a decision. Like both my sons, I'll start down a path. And they're like, yeah, we got it. And it's like, okay, that's cool. I think they'll know in the first week. And I think other folks will probably stay a month. A millennial will make a decision on whether or not this is where they want to be longer term. Now, from a company's perspective, I think onboarding starts way back at pre-boarding, starts at learning and recruiting some of the information that you want to pull through. But I think that's an 18-month journey. So I think from a company perspective, you need to think about onboarding as a much longer tail, much longer tail than you do right now. Because like when you and I came up, it was a binder, or it was a day, or it was a couple of hours, or maybe even a week. Whoa, my goodness! Well, we're gonna go in a whole week and learn some stuff. Yeah, no, these are micro experiences, and so these are things that need to happen over a much longer tail. But I would say Gen Z, very quickly. Millennials, they would probably give it a month, but if they have a bad experience at the end of a month, if they've basically graded it out and said, this isn't for me, my boss isn't receptive, or I don't, whatever the bid is,
like I belong.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one, because you can trick people in recruiting. Like saying that because you have all the things that you can say, well, we have ERGs, we care about minorities, this, that, the other. And then all of a sudden people get in and find out, well, what's going on? And so that lasts for about a month for millennials. And then they're like, yeah, I'm not here to change you. If you're not willing to see change and do it yourself, I'd love to be a part of it, but I'm not going to change you. They'll just change jobs. It's too easy to change jobs.
So I've got to admit that I don't actually know the answer to that on the age correlation. I know the overall number, and now I've made a note for myself. This is a learning experience for me too. I've got to go look at the data and find that one out. Overall, 2 out of 3 candidates tell us that they know within either the first day or the first week whether they're going to be sticking around or not. So very early, very quickly, like you lean towards. And so if you have managers, by the way, anyone listening, like you have managers like, I'm going to check in a month or check in at 2 weeks. Like, no. Back that sucker up. Be there, be intentional, don't have them spending big chunks of time by themselves that first day. Get them connected to people, get them in the loop, make them feel like they are connected, not just to hoodwink them, as you've mentioned, William, but to make them truly feel connected to people around them, what the company's about, because you have a very short runway to make that happen, or they're going to opt out.
Well, you've mentioned the word intentionality or a couple times. You do that in recruiting. And if we do that well in recruiting, then we can pull people forward. But the historical line of demarcation between recruiting, talent acquisition, and HR was onboarding. The offer letter's been sent, they've accepted, baton's been passed. And I think the thing is what we've got to do is put a sense of urgency into HR. It's like, let them tell us to slow down. Let them tell us, I need another week to figure that out. Okay. Like, go faster than they Like this is one of the bits is you want to be in HR, you want to go faster than your employee. So how do you do that? Well, some of this is process, some of it's tech, and some of it's just mindset. Like we've got to change our mindset from like thinking that onboarding is this little bitty moment in time, and then
Yes.
and then it's done. It's like it never ends.
All right. I had so much fun with this. We're about to wrap up for the rest of the day, but William, thank you for spending some time with me. I'll make sure and tag you here in the comments when anyone can
100%.
reach out and connect with you, follow you, reach out to you here on LinkedIn where you're very active. I appreciate your inputs and your ideas here. This has been great.
Thank you, my friend. Always.
Absolutely. To everybody else, hang tight for a wrap up shortly. Okay. I hope you got some good notes. George, let me bring you back up, my friends. I hope you got some good notes and some good suggestions, ideas from that last little bit there. There were some excellent takeaways. I feel like some things that we can do that cost us exactly nothing and can create more engaging experiences or candidates, can get them more inspired and encouraged to talk to us, can lead to reductions in ghosting, all those kinds of things. So good stuff there. George, I'm going to get our awards or our prizes ready to celebrate and share some of those names there that are for people who have won. What was your big takeaway? I know I've kept you on mute for like a session or two, so I know you're probably chomping at the bit. So what's top of mind for you? What are your big takeaways?
I think overall, Ben, when it comes to, this talent acquisition and recruiting, we talk about a lot of these different things and how it goes hand in hand, the impact it makes on the workplace when you're bringing in new hires, and allowing them to bring what I like to call bring their soul to work, right? Bring who you are to this organization, bring your purpose, bring your potential, bring your passion, bring your values, and add that to the culture of the organization. A couple of things that really, really stuck with me is the quote, because I believe over time we use this quote, and I believe it was Peter, and I forget his last name. Peter, yes, he created this quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I'm to this place now, and maybe it's just me in my head that there's a thing called unity, right? That the one doesn't have to defeat the other, because sometimes strategy destroys culture. If you really want to be honest, sometimes our business strategy says who cares about culture, and it ruins it. So this is the way I like to put it. What is culture? When I think of culture, it is three things. It's how employees feel, believe, and behave most of the time. The foundation is how you feel. Now, we as an organization at times, we try to control culture by controlling people's behavior and say, hey, you need to act this way. And the reality is why I act is an outcome of the root, right? So my behavior is the root of how I feel. And so we want to grow this culture. And I'm very passionate about this, if you didn't know. And so culture is how people feel, believe, and behave. How George feels determines how I will behave, and how I behave or what I believe then becomes my behavior. So feel, believe, behave. How I feel becomes my belief, and my belief becomes my behavior. And it's my reality that culture doesn't eat strategy for breakfast. Culture and strategy meets for breakfast. We have a business strategy, a sales strategy, a marketing strategy. Organizations that thriving, where employees really want to belong, have a culture strategy of some sort, where they want people to feel like they are part of something bigger than what they do, but it's tied to a why. And I think when it comes to recruitment, when we talk about bringing in new hires, we talk about storytelling that we were discussing earlier with Lisa. When we talk about all these things, community with Camille and all these things, all this comes together on how you make employees feel in the beginning. How are you interviewing that employee? How are they feeling in the interview process? How do you make them feel when you're bringing them to the table, whether it's a phone interview initially? Do you make them feel like, hey, I want you to be a part of this team? Or do you give them a feeling that, hey, I don't know if you're going to fit? People have that feeling. It goes to what you said in that last thought, Ben, with that chair, is that employees now, when they get hired, new hires, when they join your team, they're making the decision within 5 days whether or not they're going to stay with your employee, your organization. And the reason boils down to culture. How do you make them feel within that first 5 days? All the core values, the marketing that you use for the hiring process, all those things come to light. The reality is that we see clear now. We take the root of what it is initially. That first week, how does leadership make me feel? How does this team make me feel? Is it and does it align with what you say? Are the core values being lived? Is it just the core values on the wall? Are you living those core values? Are they a promise that you have that you live daily in everything that you do, say, and believe? And if not, we're out of this place. And so a lot of those things tied to culture. So I want to encourage people, let's not eat strategy for breakfast. Culture and strategy can meet together. And that aligns also with recruitment. How does culture and strategy align with your recruiting strategy? And your hiring practices, and how can they make each other better? I'll stop right there, Ben, because I can go on and on and on about how this alignment works. But it all ties to leadership. It all rises and falls on leadership. And how we strategically think and then put into action that plan that we have.
Wonderful. I love and appreciate that, George. Every time you bring your culture definition out, I'm like, yes, I want to jump up and down and cheer. So I'm with you on that one. All right, everybody. So I know you've been hanging out, waiting to see prizes, information on credits, all that good stuff. So we're going to wrap up here. Thank you again, George, for joining me here, for the amazing audience, for chiming in, for participating today, for really coming alongside us, for our amazing speakers and partners on this event. We've had so many great takeaways and ideas from this. I can't wait to repackage some of these conversations into the podcast to really draw out some of those insights as well there. Excellent. All right. So let's share this up. For those of you that are here on the screen, just shoot an email to our team, events@lhra.io. You can do a screenshot here if you are on this list. So we're giving away copies of my book on recruiting, retaining a shrinking workforce, giving away some of these fun notebooks, Recruit, Coffee, Repeat. And anyone that gets one of those, we're going to give you as well one of the Champion Your Purpose books there. If you get the notebooks, you can have something to read and something to write in. There you go. And then Matt Johnson, you were all over it today. Great comments, suggestions, questions, interactions in the chat today. So this mug right here is going to be headed your way, Matt. Thank you for participating today, for being an all-star in the conversation and really chiming in and being an active contributor. As I said earlier, thank you to our supporters, Talru, Brazen, BrightHire, all made this possible. They're all helping employers solve really big problems when it comes to hiring across the spectrum. And I really enjoyed the sessions today that they helped to bring together. For your credits, HRCI, SHRM credits, pre-approved for this event. That email will be coming in the next 24 hours with links to the replay and other things that you're going to want to see. Thank you to all of you again for joining us for the session today. George and I appreciate you. Appreciate you spending some time with us, and hope you go out there, make the next year, make your hiring the best it's ever been. Thank you so much and have a good one.
Thank you.